Chapter 1888. Choosing a Planet. Whoosh. Luo Yenjing had been following Zhuowen and Qi-Qi. When Qi-Qi flew into the continent of the Yellow Planet, Luo Yenjing flew to Zhuowen's side. At this moment, Moyan Wushang and Shiji were standing silently on Luo Yenjing's back. Behind them were Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao, who represented the Ryuka people, as well as Yuan Hongwen and the rest of the continent's warriors. Moyan Wushang was silent. Suddenly, she came to Zhuowen and whispered, "Are you really leaving? Can't you stay?" Zhuowen shook his head and said, "As you can see, both Taiqing and Yuqing have extremely high statuses in the Huaxia Heaven domain. This long river galaxy is already big enough, but it is only a corner of the Huaxia Heaven domain. Since I have been accepted as a disciple by Master Taiqing, I can only follow him to the core of the Heaven domain." Moyan Wushang nodded. She raised her beautiful eyes and stared at Zhuowen. "You have a strong death aura. Taiqing is so strong. If you follow him, you should be able to be cured, right?" Zhuowen was stunned, and then he said with a smile, "Don't worry, Master Grand Pure One's strength is extremely formidable and possesses great ability. I'll surely not suffer any mishaps while following by his side." Zhuowen didn't say his guess. After all, it wouldn't do him or the people of the Heavenly Armor continent any good. "Zhuowen, we are proud of you. No matter what happens to you in the future, we will come to visit you." Long Xiaotian walked up to Zhuowen, patted him on the shoulder, and said solemnly, "I hope you can visit us often." Feng Xiao grabbed Zhuowen's hands and said softly, "Son, I know you have grown up. But when you go out, you must be more careful. Remember to take care of yourself." Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao knew that Zhuowen would leave with Taiqing. Although they were reluctant, they did not force him to stay. Instead, like ordinary parents who were sending off their son, they kept telling Zhuowen some trivial things. Staring at the nagging Feng Xiao, Zhuowen felt a trace of warmth in his heart. In a sense, Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian were not his real parents, but in name, in his identity as Zhuowen of the Heavenly Armor continent, they were indeed his parents. From the words of Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian, he could feel that kind of unreserved concern, which was the concern of a family that outsiders could not achieve. Shiji stepped forward and patted Zhuowen's shoulder. He remained silent, but Zhuowen could see the sadness and loneliness on Shiji's face. Shiji himself was a figure from the ancient era. 10,000 years ago, he had lost too many people he knew. In the final battle of the Heavenly Armor continent, he had become the only surviving ancient martial art practitioner. It could be said that he was somewhat out of tune with this era. Zhuowen could understand the pain in Shiji's heart, but he did not say much. He just patted Shiji's shoulder gently and looked at each other without saying anything. Next, Yuan Hongwen, Ji Chenyan, and some other young geniuses of the Central Plains who knew Zhuowen met with Zhuowen one by one. Most of them were extremely grateful to Zhuowen. Not only did Zhuowen save everyone, but he also found a new planet for them. It could be said that he had done everything he could. Whoosh! Qi-Qi returned once again. He smiled at Zhuowen and said, "Young Master Zhuo, the cultivators on this planet have completely moved away. Young Master and everyone can now enter the continent on this planet." Zhuowen glanced at the continent floating on the planet and found that there were indeed no cultivators on it. In the center of the continent there was a huge beam of light. That beam of light should be a teleportation array, and the cultivators on this continent should have been teleported away by the beam of light. "Thank you, Senior Qi." Zhuowen cupped his fists and said. Qi-Qi waved his hand and said with a smile, "Young Master Zhuo is too polite. Now, everyone, let's enter the continent first. Also, this continent and planet are currently ownerless. Young Master Zhuo can name it. When the time comes, this planet will become Young Master Zhuo's private property. No one in the galaxy will dare to touch this planet." Zhuowen cupped his fists again and said with emotion, "This planet will be called the Heavenly Armor Planet, and the continent will be called the Heavenly Armor Continent." Heavenly armor planet? Heavenly armor continent? Chi-Chi muttered in a low voice. Then, he praised, Young Master Zhuo, that's a good name. Zhuowen smiled faintly, ignoring Chi-Chi's obvious flattery. He said, Senior Chi, let's talk after we enter this continent. Hearing this, Chi-Chi nodded and led everyone into the interior of the continent. The moment they entered the continent, everyone could feel that the continent contained a rich amount of immortal chi. The immortal chi on this continent was extremely rich. It was comparable to the heavenly armor continent in ancient times. Cultivating on this continent filled with immortal chi made it much easier for many warriors on the heavenly armor continent to advance to the saint stage. After all, there was a huge difference between vitality and immortal chi. The energy of immortal chi was much higher than that of vitality. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement as they entered the continent. Without a doubt, this continent was many times better than the heavenly armor continent. Chi-Chi looked at the excited crowd in surprise. The immortal chi on this continent was only average in the Long River Galaxy. He was originally worried that Zhuowen would be dissatisfied. Now that he saw the excitement on the faces of the people on the heavenly armor continent, the worry in his heart dissipated. Of course, if Chi-Chi knew the environment of the heavenly armor continent, he would understand why everyone was so excited. After Chi-Chi gave a simple introduction of the continent, he was sent away by Zhuowen. From now on, this will be the new heavenly armor continent. Standing on a high mountain, Zhuowen looked down at the vast land and felt a sense of heroism in his heart. At this moment, the people on the heavenly armor continent were scattered around the continent, preparing to reorganize their forces and troops. Ryuka was the force behind Zhuowen, so they had the best location and resources on this continent. No one was dissatisfied because of this. Instead, they felt that it was natural. After all of this was because of Zhuowen. It could be said that it was because of Zhuowen that they had the qualifications to live on this fertile continent. Moyan Wushang stood silently behind Zhuowen. She quietly looked at Zhuowen's back. She did not know why, but when she looked at the back in front of her, she felt inexplicably at ease. Even if she had to stand behind Zhuowen and look at his back, she was willing to do so. The wind whistled and blew Zhuowen's long hair. Then, Zhuowen took out the bloody pentameter and gently stroked the patterns on its surface. Whoosh! A black light flowed around the bloody pentameter, and then the shadow of a Xiao Hei dog appeared. The little black dog rubbed its arms with its paws in a very human-like manner. It looked at Zhuowen with a strange expression and roared, "Why are you so mushy? You're giving me goosebumps. Let me tell you, I don't have that kind of fetish." Zhuowen's head was filled with black lines when he saw Xiao Hei spouting nonsense without changing his nature. However, he soon burst out laughing extremely heartily. "Kid, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Hei was extremely dissatisfied. "I think it's good. Xiao Hei, it's good that you're alive." Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and gently patted Xiao Hei's head. Xiao Hei stared blankly at Zhuowen. Then, it crossed its paws and turned its head away. "Why are you suddenly so mushy?" "Haha, I'm just happy. Can you tell me why you suddenly fused into the bloody pentameter? And where's Qing Huang?" Zhuowen patted his head and asked. Xiao Hei's face sank inside. "The reason I didn't die is actually thanks to that old fox, Qing Huang. The moment the two of us entered the bloody pentameter, Qing Huang suddenly used the Fushi Cauldron's power to forcefully turn me into an artifact spirit at the last moment. Then, I fused into the bloody pentameter." Zhuowen was stunned and his heart sank. He knew that Qing Huang was the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron, so it was not strange for it to know the secret technique to refine an artifact spirit. That guy is a real fool. He clearly could have directly become the artifact spirit of the bloody pentameter and avoided disaster, but he didn't. Instead, he gave the opportunity to me. What a fool! Xiao Hei's eyes reddened as she spoke. Zhuowen patted Xiao Hei's head but did not say anything. He knew that Qing Huang had sacrificed itself to save Xiao He. Although Xiao He and Qing Huang usually quarreled, the two of them were very close. They could be considered bad friends on Earth in his previous life. With Qing Huang's sacrifice, it was inevitable that Xiao He would be somewhat depressed. Zhuowen did not know what to say and could only remain silent. This is the new Heavenly Armor Continent. I think that the seniors who protected the Heavenly Armor Continent should be remembered by everyone on the continent. Zhuowen suddenly stood up and took a step forward. He took out a few of the tallest mountains on the continent. Then, Zhuowen's right hand was like a knife as he used his powerful star god energy to carve on the mountain's surface. Zhuowen's carving was very detailed and meticulous. After a while, a human figure was formed. The face of this statue was none other than the strongest person on the Heavenly Armor Continent, Songjie. Then, Zhuowen continued to carve Fuxi, Dongfang, Shimen, Nangong, Beichen, Songlong, and the first mountain god. At the same time, he also carved the Fuxi cauldron and a smiling little fox on the cauldron. The Fuxi cauldron was placed at the height of Fuxi's shoulder. A total of 8 stone statues stood quietly in the center of the continent. Because the stone statue was so tall that it pierced through the clouds, the entire continent could clearly see the huge stone statue that stood erect and never fell. Especially some cultivators, after seeing Zhuowen casually carving such a huge stone statue, all of them revealed looks of awe and reverence. There were also some fanatics who shouted Zhuowen's name. These were all Zhuowen's admirers. After finishing the carving, Zhuowen floated in front of the stone statues with a complicated expression. Then, Zhuowen pulled up his trousers and knelt on the ground. If it weren't for your sacrifice, I, Zhuowen, would have died thousands of times over. Zhuowen will never forget your kindness. Chapter 1889. Li Zhuowen's bow was like a domino effect. Everyone on the continent knelt on the ground one after another. Their eyes were filled with sincerity and respect. Although it was Zhuowen who defeated Yang Yi and Master Shi in the end, they all knew that without these people's sacrifice, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to save the entire Heavenly Armor Continent with his own strength. After bowing 3 times, Zhuowen stepped into the air and floated in front of the stone statue. Looking at the many warriors on the continent, he said in a deep voice, Songjie was the strongest person on the Heavenly Armor Continent in the past. 10,000 years ago, he turned the tide and suppressed the sky gods to save the entire Heavenly Armor Continent. 10,000 years later, the disaster happened again. With his broken body, he passed on his power to me and arranged many secret plans. Although he was devoured by Master Shi, we don't dare to forget his contributions. Fuxi, Dongfang, Shimen, Beichen, and Nangong, the 4 true immortals, in order to restrain Yang Yi, they didn't hesitate to self-detonate to buy time for us to escape. And he is Taoist Songlong and the first mountain god. They are the same person. In order to defeat Yang Yi, they sacrificed themselves to help me form the divine soul and become a sky god. In the end, I was able to defeat Yang Yi. Zhuowen's words were impassioned and full of emotion. It was very infectious. In just a few sentences, he narrated the tragic deeds of Songjie, Fuxi, Taoist Songlong, and the others, which influenced countless warriors on the continent. In a valley in the most remote corner of the continent, Shi walked slowly. He was in a daze like a walking corpse. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the stone statues of Songjie, Fuxi, and the others that Zhuowen had carved. Especially when he heard Zhuowen's passionate narration, his gaze was extremely complicated. However, he soon revealed a gratified expression. After 10,000 years, I already feel tired. Thank you, Zhuowen. If it wasn't for you, everyone on the Heavenly Armor Continent would have died an unnatural death. Shi muttered in a low voice. Soon after, he silently entered the depths of the valley. 10,000 years of settling down had already caused Shi to feel deeply exhausted. He decided to live in seclusion and no longer concern himself with the affairs of the world. In front of the stone statue, Zhuowen seemed to have sensed something. He glanced at the mountain valley where Shiji was and exchanged glances with Shiji from afar. He didn't say anything and only nodded at Shiji. Shiji also nodded back lightly. Although the two of them didn't speak, they understood each other's intentions. Zhuowen looked at the stone statues of Cangjie, Fuxi and the others again. He whispered to himself, although Yang Yi is dead, he is just a doppelganger of Sakyamuni. If I, Zhuowen, ascend to the virtual sky one day, I will definitely kill Sakyamuni and sacrifice Sakyamuni to you. In the following period of time, Zhuowen remained in the new heavenly armor continent. During this period of time, he often spent time with his parents, grandfather, and other relatives. He also often visited Moyan Wushang, Yuan Hongwen, and the others. Although everyone got along well and happily, there was a faint trace of sadness in this happiness. They all knew that Zhuowen wouldn't stay on this continent for long. After a while, Zhuowen would be summoned by Taiqing and leave the Long River Galaxy. On this day, the sun was shining brightly. In a huge courtyard, Zhuowen, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Long Xiangding and other close Ryuka clansmen were sitting together. Moyan Wushang sat not far from Zhuowen and silently looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen chatted and laughed with everyone. Everyone laughed from time to time. It was a harmonious scene. Suddenly, Zhuowen's face changed slightly and his eyes became gloomy. When everyone saw Zhuowen's expression, the smiles on their faces froze. Zhuowen stood up silently and cupped his fist to everyone. He said, "Everyone, I should go. Child, be careful along the way. Father and mother are not strong enough to protect you. In the future, everything will depend on you. If you have the chance, come back more often." Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao stood up and sighed. The rest of the people also stood up. Although they were extremely reluctant, they also knew that the person who took Zhuowen away this time was the great Taiqing. Moyan Wushang bit her lower lip and stood up. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen and said, "Zhuowen, will you come back?" Zhuowen turned to look at Moyan Wushang and said with a smile, "Yes, I will definitely come back." Hearing this, Moyan Wushang smiled and said in a low voice, "That's good. I will wait for you to come back." Zhuowen's eyes showed a trace of hesitation. He turned around and faced Moyan Wushang in front of him. He found that the corners of Moyan Wushang's eyes had unknowingly welled up with tears. Bang! Suddenly, Zhuowen felt a fragrant wind. Then, Moyan Wushang threw herself into his arms. "You must come back. We are all waiting for you here." A young and inexperienced voice slowly sounded beside Zhuowen's ear. Soon after, the fragrant wind suddenly left his embrace. Zhuowen silently looked at Moyan Wushang who left. His eyes showed a touch of sadness. In his mind, Mu Chenxue's figure appeared. "This little girl has deep feelings for you. Can't you feel it?" Xiao Hei's voice slowly sounded. Zhuowen replied with a wry smile, "I am not blind. How can I not see it? But now, I just want to take my spiritual ring out of Devour's body. Let's talk about other things later. Moreover, Taiqing is unfathomable. I can't guess what he is thinking." Xiao Hei was silent. Then, she continued, "Devour's body has escaped to the depths of the starry sky. Even Yu Qin can't find it. How can you find it? Unless you use the blood substitution pill to be reborn in the spiritual ring. But that is simply seeking your own death." Zhuowen's eyes were calm. He said, "That's what I am thinking. This time, I will follow Taiqing to the heavenly domain of Huaxia. I will make ample preparations for my rebirth in the spiritual ring. There are countless experts in the heavenly domain of Huaxia. I am afraid that there must be many secret techniques that are much more advanced than those in the heavenly armor continent." "Secret techniques? You?" Xiao Hei seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but exclaim, "Yes. I plan to possess the young devourer. When the spirit ring was devoured by the young devourer, I had already thought of this method. However, I don't have any experience in possessing a young devourer, nor have I come in contact with any secret techniques in this area. So, I'm not sure. But now that I've become Tai Ching's disciple, no matter why he took me in as his disciple, I should be able to touch the top secret techniques and supernatural powers in the heavenly domain of Huaxia. Once I touch those powerful secret techniques and supernatural powers, I think that after my rebirth, I will be able to deal with Devour's body and seize it. Zhuowen said resolutely. Xiaohei dropped her jaw in surprise. She had to admit that Zhuowen's decision was too risky. Although Devour's young body hadn't reached adulthood, it was still Devour's descendant. How could such a powerful creature be seized so easily? Xiaohei, don't worry. I still have Devour's heaven-devouring eye. After my rebirth, it will grow out from my glabella. At that time, with the heaven-devouring eye, I will be more confident. That's why I made this decision, said Zhuowen with a smile. If you've made up your mind, I can't say anything. I just hope that you will be careful, said Xiaohei in a low voice. Zhuowen nodded, and then he said, Xiaohei, I'll leave Bloodsplatter 5 steps on this continent for now. I'll return once I've truly seized the body of an infant and devoured it. At that time, I'll take you and the entire planet with me. Then, Zhuowen handed the blood-splashing 5 steps to Long Xiaotian and then left the new heavenly armor star. Outside the central planet of the Long River Galaxy, Tai Ching and Yu Qing stood side by side, while Qi hovered respectfully behind them. Swoosh! A long rainbow zoomed over, revealing Zhuowen's figure. Seeing Zhuowen, Tai Ching and Yu Qing smiled. Tai Ching took out the Nine Suns shuttle and said, Let's go. We've settled your fellows. It's time to return to the heaven territory with us. Zhuowen nodded and then got into the Nine Suns shuttle. Tai Ching then activated the Nine Suns shuttle and disappeared from the Long River Galaxy. In the cold and dark outer space, countless abandoned planets floated in the vast space. On one of the dark silver abandoned planets, a giant exotic beast was lying dormant. This exotic beast had 12 horns on its head. Its face was ferocious, and its scales had a metallic luster. At first glance, it looked like a fighting machine. This exotic beast was Devour's young body, which had sneakily escaped from the battlefield in the heavenly armor star. After Devour had run away, it hadn't stopped to rest, heading deep into the starry sky. It had been several months before it stopped and rested on this abandoned star. Since Devour was born, it hadn't absorbed enough energy from the adult Devour. Therefore, its strength was extremely low, only at the demigod realm. Moreover, Devour had just gone through a great battle, so it had sustained many injuries. Therefore, it was extremely weak at this moment. Devour vigilantly observed this huge, abandoned planet. After confirming that there was no danger on this planet, it kept digging its claws on the surface of the planet, gradually going deeper into the planet. When it reached the bottom of the abandoned planet, it dug a huge hole in the depth. Then, it lay quietly in the hole and fell into a deep sleep. Devour was a race that relied on devouring planets to obtain energy. However, in the outer space, almost all the planets were abandoned without any energy. To Devour, these planets were like garbage, and they had no effect on its injuries. Besides, Devour's other method of recovery was to sleep. It used its sleep to reduce the consumption of energy, and the energy it saved could be used to heal its injuries. The infant Devour planned to use its deep sleep to slowly recover from its injuries. It planned to leave this abandoned star after its injuries were completely healed. Deep inside Devour's body, a blood-red skeleton-like monster was sitting cross-legged in the blood-red meat wall near its stomach. This blood-red monster wore a silver ring on its finger. Phew! The monster finally stopped wriggling. F***ck, luckily I, the blood immortal, am wise. The moment I fell into the monster's stomach, I immediately hid in the meat wall. Otherwise, I would have been digested by the monster. Chapter 1890. Tai Ching Immortal Realm. Originally, the infant Devour's body wasn't suitable for normal warriors to live in. Normally, warriors who were swallowed into its body would be corroded by its powerful blood energy, and planets that were swallowed into its body would be taken into another space similar to the starry sky. After the blood immortal was swallowed into the infant devourer's body, she was naturally considered as food, and was sent into its stomach. Originally, the powerful blood energy in Devourer's body was enough to kill most creatures. But the blood immortal was different. She cultivated blood energy, and after entering the infant Devourer's body, not only did she not feel uncomfortable, but her cultivation also improved, and she directly became a sky immortal. The surging blood energy in the infant Devourer's body was too suitable for the blood immortal to live in, but it was only limited to this meat wall that she found. Because the infant Devourer's body was full of danger, just the acid in its stomach under the meat wall was enough to corrode the blood immortal into nothingness. And before the infant Devourer fell asleep, its meat wall kept wriggling, which made the blood immortal suffer a lot. Now that the wriggling finally stopped, the blood immortal let out a heartfelt sigh of relief. How long do I have to stay in this godforsaken place? It's so lonely. The blood immortal scratched her head in irritation. Although the blood power here was indeed suitable for her to cultivate, and it also increased her cultivation speed, the blood immortal was already irritated by the fact that she could only stay in this small place for a few months. Damn it, I shouldn't have agreed to keep Zhuowen's spirit ring. Now that I'm in this state, it's all because of that Zhuowen. The blood immortal grabbed the spirit ring on her hand, and was about to throw it away, but she didn't do so in the end. Damn it, why isn't Zhuowen dead yet? When he dies, he can be reborn in this spirit ring, and then I can have someone to talk to. No, I can't throw this spirit ring away. I have to let that guy feel the harsh environment inside the infant Devourer's body. Putting away the spirit ring again, the blood immortal sat cross-legged in the meat wall angrily to cultivate her blood energy, and at the same time she hoped that Zhuowen would quickly die and be reborn. Countless galaxies shuttled under the 9-sun shuttle. Zhuowen stood on the deck, silently looking at the endless galaxies below the shuttle, and he didn't have the surprise and curiosity he had in the beginning. Along the way, he had seen too many galaxies. Now, he was no longer interested in the galaxies he had passed through. However, the vastness of the heaven domain was beyond Zhuowen's. With the 9's shuttle, they still hadn't reached the center of the Sky Taichings and the others. As for how the Grand Pure One and Jade Pure One had only spent a short amount of time to reach outer space, it was naturally because they had used warp with all their strength. US was Tian Yuqing and Yuqing was US Yuan and U was that too and U to was U was and U spaces and Udo to used to U to U to Yut. TS to S to Zhuo lifted his eyelids and suddenly saw 3 enormous star regions in front of the 9 suns shuttle in the distance. These 3 star domains were made up of countless galaxies, and this scene shocked Zhuowen. Along the way, he saw only individual galaxies. Moreover, there was a considerable distance between each galaxy. However, the 3 star domains in front of him were different. Each star domain was made up of distinct galaxies, and countless stars twinkled, embellishing the complexity and uniqueness of these star domains. These 3 star domains had different appearances, and one of them was made up of countless galaxies that formed the shape of a huge heavenly palace. This huge heavenly palace emitted an unimaginable pressure. Another star domain was completely red, and most of the stars in this star domain were stars that emitted terrifying heat. Compared to the terrifying number of stars, there were far fewer planets with life in this star field. They only took up about 1/3 of the total star field. Moreover, when these star systems were grouped together, their shape was like a crimson land. On this crimson land, flames burned endlessly. The last star domain was made up of countless galaxies made up of planets with life. Its appearance was like fog, as if it was surrounded by clouds and mist. It was like a paradise on Earth, beautiful and magnificent. These 3 star domains looked like they were put together, but they weren't. They were arranged in a triangle in 3 directions and complemented each other. This is, Zhuowen looked at these 3 star domains in shock, and his heart pounded. It was his first time seeing such a majestic star domain. Taiqing glanced at Zhuowen and said with a smile, Zhuowen, these 3 star domains are where the 3 pure ones of Taoism are. The huge heavenly palace is called the Qingwei Heavenly Palace, and it's the territory of Yuqing. And that star region that is like a barren land is the territory of the Prime Clear. It is called the Prime Clear Barren Land. The Prime Clear is obsessed with refining weapons, so there are many kinds of stars in their territory. They use the powerful heat of the stars to forge powerful weapons. As for the last star domain, it's where I live, and it's called the Taiqing Celestial Realm. Only when he heard this did Zhuowen find out that these 3 regions were actually the residences of the Sky Dao sect, Jade Dao sect, and the Prime Dao sect that he'd never met. Zhuowen had heard about the 3 pure ones in legends in his previous life. The 3 pure ones were the ancestors of Taoism, and they were the Yuqing Yuanshi Heavenly Lord, the Taiqing Daod Heavenly Lord, and the Shangqing Lingbao Heavenly Lord. It could be said that the 3 pure ones were extremely famous on earth in his previous life, and they were once crowned as supreme gods by the ancients. Now, Zhuowen saw the Yuqing and Taiqing of the 3 pure ones with his own eyes. It could be said that this was unbelievable in his previous life, but now, Zhuowen's heart was as still as water, and he was neither sad nor happy. Master, I want to go to my previous life's hometown, Earth, and take a look. Zhuowen suddenly looked at Taiqing. Taiqing took a deep look at Zhuowen and said indifferently, Zhuowen, although I was the one who facilitated your transmigration, your death wasn't caused by me. It can only be said that you happened to have the Fushi cauldron at that time, and you were hunted to death. At that time, I happened to need a candidate, so I transferred your soul to the Heavenly Armor continent. Zhuowen looked at Taiqing in surprise. Based on his understanding of Taiqing, Taiqing rarely explained what he did, but this guy actually took the initiative to explain to Zhuowen, which really puzzled Yuqing. Zhuowen nodded and said in a deep voice, Master, don't worry. I know this. I'm returning to Earth this time to see my old friends and family from my previous life, to resolve my final remnant thoughts, and also to take revenge for my previous life's murder, so that my mind can be clear. Taiqing was silent for a moment, then he frowned and said, Earth is a mortal world under the jurisdiction of the Huaxia continent. Other than the manager of the mortal world, other cultivators are not allowed to enter. I know Master will definitely have a way. Zhuowen stared at Taiqing. Earth and its companion, the Huaxia continent, are in my Taiqing Wonderland star field. If you want to enter Earth to resolve your remnant thoughts, it's not impossible, but before that, I need to discuss something with you. Taiqing suddenly said. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed and he felt a little uneasy. He asked, What is it? Taiqing smiled mysteriously and said, We'll talk about this when you return from Earth. Then, Taiqing looked at Yuqing and said, Yuqing, do you want to come to my Taiqing Wonderland? I couldn't ask for more. Yuqing laughed. Taiqing nodded and said, Then let's enter the Taiqing Wonderland first. Zhuowen, are you going to Earth now? Zhuowen still nodded. Taiqing didn't waste any time and led the way. Under the 9 Suns shuttle's guidance, the group instantly entered the Taiqing Wonderland. The 9 Suns shuttle was extremely fast, and they instantly arrived at a planet that looked like a blue gem. Zhuowen's eyes fell on the blue planet, and he was slightly moved, but he quickly regained his composure. Then, his eyes turned slightly and landed on a continent that was floating above Earth. When he first comprehended the Tao will, his divine consciousness had descended to Earth when he traced the origin. At that time, his cultivation wasn't high, so he couldn't see through the restriction on the surface of the Huaxia continent. But now, his cultivation had reached the early stage of the heavenly god realm, so he could easily see the Huaxia continent. Whoosh! The moment the 9 Suns shuttle arrived outside Earth, countless sword lights suddenly swept out from the Huaxia continent. Upon closer inspection, these sword lights were actually a group of cultivators flying over on flying sword. At the head of this group of cultivators was an old man with white hair and beard. Among this group of cultivators, Zhuowen even saw the middle-aged man in white who was flying on a sword when his divine consciousness descended to earth. This middle-aged man followed behind him respectfully. Although he also saw Zhuowen, he didn't recognize Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen had only descended with his divine consciousness, and he hadn't arrived on Earth himself. How could this middle-aged man recognize Zhuowen? Sect Master of Mount Buzhou, Yu Zhe, greets Supremacy Taiqing and Supremacy Yuqing. The white-haired old man came forward, bowed, and said loudly. Many of the cultivators behind the old man also paid their respects to Taiqing and Yuqing. Taiqing nodded slightly, then pointed at Zhuowen beside him and said, Yu Zhe, this is my disciple, Zhuowen. He has some matters to take care of on Earth. I hope you can let him in for a while. Yu Zhe frowned slightly. He glanced at Zhuowen, who was beside Taiqing, with a serious look in his eyes. Being able to become the disciple of an existence like Taiqing, he naturally did not dare to be careless, but he soon looked troubled. Supremacy, your disciple is already a heavenly god. If he enters Earth with such a cultivation, he'll be devoured by the laws of Earth. He's not recognized by Earth. Yu Zhe said in a deep voice. Chapter 1891. A son wants to raise. This clone of mine should be qualified to enter Earth, right? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Yu Zhe frowned, but he still nodded in the end. This clone of yours is qualified, but there are differences between mortals and immortals. Even this clone of yours is too powerful for mortals, so once you enter Earth, you can't do as you please. Otherwise, our Huaxia continent will step in to stop you. Zhuowen nodded. I'm only going to Earth to resolve my lingering thoughts. Also, I want to destroy an organization. I hope Sect Master Yu Zhe will allow me to do so. An organization? Yu Zhe frowned. What kind of organization? I only know that this organization is called the Fog Organization back on Earth. Back then, I was an Earthling, but I was killed by the Fog Organization's assassins. Zhuowen stopped abruptly. He knew that there were some things that didn't need to be said too clearly. He had already stated his purpose, so Yu Zhe should be able to understand. Although Yu Zhe was a little confused as to why Zhuowen's previous life was an Earthling, he couldn't say anything since he had already stated his reason. After all, Zhuowen had the backing of the Taiqing sect, the ruler of the Sky Domain. Even if he didn't agree, he could only make an exception this once. Thinking of this, Yu Zhe said to a middle-aged man behind him, Kong Gu, you've always been in charge of Earth. Do you know of the Fog Organization on Earth? The middle-aged man called Kong Gu was the cultivator on a flying sword that Zhuowen had met when his consciousness descended on Earth. When he heard Yu Zhe's question, he quickly came before Yu Zhe and said in a deep voice, There is such an organization, and this organization has done many shady things on Earth. However, due to the differences between mortals and immortals, this disciple has never bothered with them. Hearing this, Yu Zhe understood why Zhuowen wanted to eliminate this organization. He nodded and said to Zhuowen, Young Master Zhuowen, we allow you to deal with the Fog Organization, but I hope you won't harm the innocent. There's one more thing. You can't stay on Earth for more than 3 days. Once 3 days have passed, you must leave. I understand. Zhuowen nodded. Kong Gu, take young Master Zhua to Earth. Yu Zhe instructed. Soon after, Kong Gu cupped his fists towards Zhuowen and said, Young Master Zhua, please follow me. With that, Kong Gu turned into a stream of light and entered Earth. Zhuowen's clone followed closely behind. Master, can you wait for 3 days? On the 9 Suns shuttle, Zhuowen's main body said to Taiqing beside him. Tai Ran smiled faintly and said, It's only 3 days. I'll wait with you. After Zhuowen expressed his gratitude, He sat down cross-legged on the deck of the Nine Sun shuttle. As for Yuze and the others, they stood outside the Nine Sun shuttle respectfully. Without Taiching's permission, they didn't dare to leave. In the blue sky, two shadows instantly cut through the void and landed in the clouds. Zhuowen looked down at the countless skyscrapers below with nostalgia in his eyes. He had lived on the heavenly armor continent for more than 10 years. In other words, more than 10 years had passed on Earth. Brother Kong, I hope you can help me find the base of the dense fog organization. I still have some matters to attend to. Once you find the base of the dense fog organization, you can inform me. With that, Zhuowen cupped his fists towards Kong-gu and left silently, entering the continent below the clouds. Kong-gu looked at Zhuowen's back in confusion and muttered, "This person gives me a very familiar feeling. It's as if I've seen him somewhere before. But when I think about it carefully, I can't remember where. Forget it. Maybe it's just my imagination. I'll go look for the dense fog organization first. They change their base frequently. Although I noticed this organization back then, I didn't pay much attention to it. Now I need to investigate it seriously." With that, Kong-gu stepped on his sword and disappeared into the clouds. Zhuowen slowly made his way through the bustling street. He was like a lonely traveler, out of tune with this busy world. Zhuowen's powerful divine senses swept across the entire continent. In his divine senses, he discovered many familiar faces from his previous life. All of them were already middle-aged, and the children were already over 10 years old. Zhuowen smiled, but he did not take the initiative to greet these familiar faces from his previous life, nor did he disturb their lives. He knew very well that these people had completely forgotten Zhuowen after more than 10 years. There was no need for him to appear in their lives. Zhuowen kicked off with his right foot and disappeared from the bustling street. When he reappeared, he was already in a seaside town. Feeling the salty sea breeze, Zhuowen revealed a trace of warmth on his face. His gaze followed the sea breeze and fell on an extremely inconspicuous house in the town. For the first time, there was a trace of change in his gaze. Within this change, there was a trace of deep guilt. Zhuowen landed on the roof of the house and looked at the couple drying fish in the courtyard. He suddenly felt a lump in his throat. The couple's hair was already graying, and their waists were hunched. Traces of wrinkles had appeared on their faces due to the passage of time. Zhuowen quietly looked at the couple for a very long time. Finally, after the couple finished drying the fish, they leaned against each other and wanted to enter the house. The woman, who was over 50 years old, seemed to sense something. She raised her head and looked at the roof of the house. Her eyes met with Zhuowen's. At this moment, Zhuowen's pupils constricted to the extreme. His heart pounded rapidly, and the guilt in his eyes became even more intense. He choked with sobs as he called out softly, "Mother, Ruoxue, what's wrong?" The hunched man looked at the roof that the woman was looking at with some surprise. When he realized that there was nothing on the roof, his eyes were filled with confusion. Tears flowed from the corner of the woman's eyes. She choked with sobs and said, I think I saw one just now." Our one the man hugged the woman tightly in his arms and gently patted her back. He sighed and said, "Ruoxue, one died more than 10 years ago. Don't think too much about it. Boo-hoo, one-er's death was not worth it. Even now, we still don't know who the murderer is. The police are also vague about one-er's death. Perhaps the murderer is still at large. Thinking of this, my heart hurts." The woman leaned on the man's chest and choked with sobs. In the corner of the house, Zhuowen quietly leaned against the wall. He listened to the conversation between the woman and the man. His eyes suddenly turned red, and the sourness in his nose became even more intense. A trace of pain and helplessness rose in his heart. In this world, perhaps only my parents still miss me, but my identity is already dead. Thinking back to how his soul was used by Taiching to travel to the heavenly armor continent after his death, Zhuowen realized that his identity on Earth was already a dead person. A child wants to raise, but his parents are no longer around. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and stared at the blue sky. He said firmly, "But I don't want this to happen. I hope that I can fulfill my last filial duty." A powerful space-time power surged out of Zhuowen's body. Then, this space-time power enveloped the small town. At this moment, the entire town seemed to have fallen into a torrent of time. Beside the Nine Suns shuttle, Yuzhe sensed something and said with a gloomy expression, "Young Master Zhuo, you're actually using the law of time in the mortal world? I only need to reverse 50 years of time. After 50 years, I will restore the time of that town," Zhuowen's original body said calmly. Yuzhe frowned and looked at Taiqing. He saw Taiqing smiling but didn't say anything. Yuzhe could only sigh and remain silent. "Dad, Mom, I'm back. I've graduated from university and I've brought my girlfriend. Dad, Mom, let me support this family in the future. You've worked hard for the past 20 years. Enjoy your old age. Dad, Mom, I'm married. How about I give birth to a fair and clean grandson for you? Dad, Mom, your grandson has grown up. I'll take good care of you in the future. Dad, Mom." Time reversed and moved forward again. The events of more than a decade ago seemed to be reconstructed. Zhuowen was like a bystander, quietly watching everything that had happened in the past 50 years. He saw the peaceful smiles on his parents' faces. Everything was so harmonious. In the end, Zhuowen knelt in front of the two tombstones and kowtowed heavily. His body trembled uncontrollably as he sobbed. After kowtowing 3 times, time slowly reversed and returned to the scene of the woman and the man leaning against each other in the courtyard. "Ruoxue, I seem to have had a dream just now. I dreamed that Wen'er came back. He even got married and gave birth to a grandson for us." The man suddenly trembled emotionally. The woman's face flushed red. She nodded heavily and said, "I dreamed about it too. I'm sure I saw Wen'er just now. He must have told us in the dream to complete what he couldn't do back then. It must have been Wen'er." With that, the woman knelt on the ground. The man followed suit. The two of them put their palms together and silently prayed for Zhuowen in their hearts. Zhuowen slowly rose into the air. With a wave of his sleeve, a gentle energy silently flowed into the woman and the man's bodies. This energy could completely improve their bodies and heal all their hidden injuries. If there were no accidents, the woman and the man would have no problem living until they were 100 years old. Moreover, Zhuowen had also changed their fortunes. At least for the rest of their lives, the two of them would be healthy. Although they wouldn't be rich, they would at least live a well-off life in the future. "Father, Mother, I'm unfilial. This is all I can do for you now." Zhuowen slowly rose into the air. He quietly looked at the two figures that were getting smaller and smaller. The corners of his mouth were full of bitterness. "Brother Zhuo, you're no longer people of the same world as them. The lifespan of mortals is only a few decades. Most of them can't live past 100 years. They're destined to leave you. This is the law of nature. It's also the difference between immortals and mortals in our Huaxia mainland." A sword light swept over. Konggu landed not far from Zhuowen on his sword. He naturally saw everything that Zhuowen had done and sighed with emotion. "Brother Kong, how long have you been cultivating?" Zhuowen suddenly looked at Konggu and asked. Chapter 1892. Comprehending Tao Intent. Zhuowen fell silent. He suddenly realized that cultivation itself was actually very cruel. When you continuously cultivated in pursuit of that unreachable peak, you would actually realize that you had lost a lot of things in the process. Cultivation knew no time. Once you stepped onto the path of cultivation, it was actually just a drop in the ocean. To cultivators, it was really insignificant. It was just a short moment on their path of cultivation. Zhuowen's cultivation time was really too short, so he didn't have such a deep understanding. However, now that he had returned to Earth, he saw his old friends from his previous life. He realized that these old friends were gradually aging, and he also saw his parents' gray hair and wrinkled faces. This was the natural law of the mortal world that he had never experienced in the heavenly armor continent. The path of cultivation has always been lonely. Brother Joie, have you seen through it? Are you still bound by these emotions? Whether or not you are bound by them, you must remember that there is a difference between immortals and mortals. You have already reversed 50 years with the law of time. You have already fulfilled your filial duty. If you continue to accompany them, it will only cause you more pain. Kong-gu sighed softly. Zhuowen closed his eyes slightly. Then, with a flick of his finger, 2 spots of light entered the heads of the woman and the man below. Then, the woman and the man's eyes revealed a blank expression. Father, mother, you shouldn't be immersed in the pain of the past and forget this unfilial son of yours. After saying that, Zhuowen slowly closed his eyes. After completely erasing the memories of his parents from his previous life, his state of mind reached an unprecedented height at this moment. A shapeless ripple slowly stretched out from within Zhuowen's body. Kong-gu seemed to have noticed something, and he had an expression as if he'd seen a ghost as he stared at Zhuowen before him and muttered in a low voice. This wouldn't be Tao insight, right? Brother Joie is comprehending Tao intent? At this moment, in the 9-sun shuttle outside of Earth, Zhuowen's original body, who was originally sitting cross-legged on the deck, suddenly opened his eyes. Extremely terrifying ripples burst forth from his eyes. It wasn't just his eyes. All the acupoints in his body opened. Waves of terrifying and mysterious ripples spread out. This ripple was truly too terrifying. It actually affected the 9-sun shuttle, causing it to violently tremble. Not only that, but the dozens of cultivators outside of the 9-sun shuttle, who were flying on the sword led by Yu Zhe, were also affected by this ripple. They almost couldn't control of their flying swords. Tao intent? This kid is comprehending Tao intent again? Could it be? Yu Qing's pupils shrank as she muttered. Not only Yu Qing, Taiching's. From Taiching. From his originally. From Taiching's, he was from Taiching. From Taiching, translation. From Yu's translation. As for Yu Zhe, he was even dumbstruck. He'd already sensed the energy of this Tao insight, and he knew that this kid was comprehending Tao insight. Moreover, judging from the fluctuations of the Tao insight Zhuowen had comprehended, it was at least a 4th-level Tao insight. So long as it was a cultivator of the Huaxia sky region, they all knew that Tao insights were divided into 9 levels. A 1st-level Tao insight was extremely difficult for most cultivators, let alone a 4th-level Tao insight. It could be said that amongst the countless geniuses in Huaxia, it was rare to be able to comprehend 4th-level Tao intent. Because the difference between 3rd-level Tao intent and 4th-level Tao intent was actually quite big. The first 3 levels were elementary Tao intents, and once one reached the 4th level, it would be intermediate-level Tao intent. Yu Zhe finally knew why Taiching would take this kid as his disciple. Since he was able to comprehend 4th-level Tao intent, this kid's comprehension ability was ranked at the top in the entire Huaxia. Taking this kid as my disciple was indeed the right choice. Taiching revealed a rare expression of joy as he exchanged glances with Yu Qing. On Earth, Zhuowen's spiritual force clone slowly opened its eyes. At the instant his mental state improved, he'd indeed touched upon the 4th level of the Tao insight realm. However, Zhuowen's main body immediately cut off the connection with his clone. His main body comprehended the 4th-level Tao intent by himself, whereas his clone prepared to complete the last thing on Earth. Zhuowen said to Kong-gu, who was beside him, "Brother Kong, you've found the Mist Organization's base, right?" "Yes. It's deep underground in a rainforest at the border between Huaxia and Southeast Asia. I intentionally used my divine sense to scan the area earlier, and only then was I able to discover the organization's base. Since you want to annihilate the Mist Organization, then try your best to minimize the commotion and don't involve other ordinary people," said Kong-gu. Zhuowen nodded when he heard this, and then his divine sense spread out like a ripple and instantly flashed to the location Kong Gu spoke of. I'll go take a look first. I'll try my best to avoid harming the innocent. Moreover, the Mist Organization's location is so remote. As long as I'm careful, I won't make too much of a commotion. As Zhuowen spoke, he vanished on the spot. Within the dense rainforest, the sun was scorching, and the lush green forest was filled with all sorts of dangers. Perhaps a sudden appearance of a venomous snake could take a person's life, or a hidden swamp could cause a person to sink deep and die. Within the rainforest, a group of people advanced with extreme agility. This group of people moved in unison, and their actions were simple and concise. With a single glance, one could tell that they were well-trained soldiers. There were a total of 9 people in this group, and all of them wore camouflage uniforms as if they were forest killers. The leader of the 9 people was a voluptuous woman who was around 26 or 27 years old. She had a curvaceous figure and was extremely hot. This person was like a vigorous little cheetah running in the dense forest, and she was filled with a sexy and wild beauty. Leader, I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to rashly barge into this place, right? If this is really the Mist Organization's base, then wouldn't the 9 of us be like lambs entering a tiger's den? A tall man who followed closely behind the voluptuous woman said worriedly. The voluptuous woman stopped, and her beautiful eyes were filled with coldness. She coldly glanced at the 8 people behind her and said indifferently, "If any of you are afraid, you can leave now. I Ruoshi won't stop you. You also know the thoughts of those old-fashioned people above. If we can't be 100% sure that this is the Mist Organization's base, and if we can convince them, they won't send a large number of troops to investigate. In the end, they will just leave it unsettled. The Mist Organization has been running amok and tyrannical for many years, and they have done all kinds of heartless things. Today, I must thoroughly investigate their base and put an end to the evil deeds of the Mist Organization." After the voluptuous woman finished speaking, she stomped her foot and continued to rush toward the depths of the rainforest. Her speed did not decrease but increased instead. The 8 people behind her looked at each other in dismay. In the end, the tall man gritted his teeth and said, "Follow her. I don't feel at ease if I go alone." After saying that, the group of 8 people rushed out as fast as shuttles. Seeing the 8 people following her, the voluptuous woman named Ruoshi's cherry lips revealed a faint smile. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Then, countless black shadows appeared in front of the 9 people. Ruoshi's beautiful eyes flickered as she shouted, "Everyone, be careful." After saying that, she lowered her head and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the black shadow in front of her. However, even though Ruoshi was agile, it did not mean that the 8 people behind her were equally agile. Among them, 5 of them were unable to react in time and were stabbed by the black shadows, causing them to scream miserably. As for the remaining 3, their arms were slashed by the black shadows. Bang bang bang! Only then did Ruoshi notice that these black shadows were actually black 5-star darts. Furthermore, these 5-star darts had a silver ball attached to their surface. "Not good, this is an explosive dart, quickly dodge!" Ruoshi shouted again. Then, she ordered the 3 people beside her to retreat dozens of meters. Rumble! The moment the 4 of them retreated, the 5 people who were hit by the darts exploded one after another. Not even their bones remained. Seeing the miserable state of the 5 people, Ruoshi and the other 3 survivors all showed grief and indignation. "Flying Tiger Team Leader Ruoshi? I really don't know where you get your courage from. You dare to enter this rainforest with only 9 people? You're simply courting death." A sinister voice came from the front of the rainforest. Then, to Ruoshi's despair, she realized that there were nearly 100 figures in the bushes in front of her. The one in the lead was a middle-aged man in black camouflage clothes. The middle-aged man carefully sized up Ruoshi's hot figure. His eyes revealed a perverted look as he continued, "Desserts really came to my door. When the time comes, everyone will have a share. As soon as the man finished speaking, the people behind him laughed wantonly. Ruashi's pretty face turned green and white. She was not a naive girl. Naturally, she could hear the middle-aged man's implied meaning. Boss, what should we do? This is definitely the base of the fog organization. Otherwise, it's impossible for so many people to appear here. But I'm afraid we can't escape. The injured tall man said anxiously. Ruashi was also somewhat at a loss. She did not expect to be ambushed as soon as she entered the rainforest. Sigh. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Ruashi turned her head and looked at the three injured men. Her beautiful eyes were full of shame. Then, she took out a palm-sized grenade from her waist. Just as Ruashi was about to detonate the grenade, a terrifying sonic boom suddenly came from the sky. Bang! When the sonic boom reached its peak, a figure suddenly fell in front of the middle-aged man and his group. Ruashi's pupils shrunk as she stared at the figure in shock. She realized that this person seemed to have fallen from the sky. He actually didn't die from the fall? Who are you? The middle-aged man slightly knitted his brows and asked the figure in a probing manner. After all, this person fell from the sky. He could tell at a glance that he was not simple. Zhuowen glanced at the middle-aged man in front of him and the people behind him. He said indifferently, "Are you people from the Fog Organization? Is this the base of the Fog Organization?" The middle-aged man's eyes were cold. He knew that this person did not come with good intentions. He immediately took out an AK-47 and fired at Zhuowen. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. "Watch out!" Ruashi suddenly shouted. Unfortunately, before she could finish her words, she was shocked to find that the AK-47 in the middle-aged man's hand had shattered into pieces. What? The middle-aged man's mouth was wide open in disbelief. Bang! 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 However, before the middle-aged man could react, nearly 100 people behind him all exploded. Blood splashed into the sky and turned into a terrifying blood mist. Plop! The middle-aged man directly knelt on the ground. Smelling the thick smell of blood in the air, he couldn't help but scream, "What the hell are you?" He knew very well that someone who could possess such power was definitely not a human. That was why he asked, "Take me to the base." Zhuowen waved his right hand and grabbed the middle-aged man. His eyes were cold. "Don't kill me. I'll take you there." Chapter 1893. Hall of Morals. Zhuowen couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with this person. He pressed his right hand on the man's head and began to search through his memories. As he searched through the man's memories, Zhuowen's expression became more and more unsightly. Boundless killing intent even rose in his eyes. He saw countless dark scenes in the man's memories. Not only were there the operations of the dense fog organization, but there were also the middle-aged man's evil deeds. This man had committed all kinds of crimes, and his hands were stained with the blood of nearly 1,000 innocent people. Although Zhuowen had also killed people, he only killed people who deserved to be killed. He would never implicate the innocent. However, the people he killed were mostly weak civilians, and he took pleasure in it. The evil deeds of the dense fog organization were even more outrageous. Other than assassinations and collecting national treasures, they even sold human organs and abducted children. Bang! Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and the middle-aged man exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Meanwhile, Zhuowen rushed toward the dense fog organization's base in the depths of the rainforest. After obtaining the middle-aged man's memories, and recalling how the dense fog organization had killed him for no reason, Zhuowen was filled with a monstrous killing intent toward the dense fog organization. Soon, Zhuowen arrived above an ordinary hill. He stared at the hill. According to the middle-aged man's memories, the base of the hill was the dense fog organization's base, and the important higher-ups and leaders of the organization were hidden inside. Disappear. Zhuowen tapped the air with his right hand. Instantly, the power of the devouring curse was unleashed. Then, it turned into an invisible hand that grabbed the hill and the dense fog organization's base in the air. How did he do that? In the rainforest, Ruoxin and the three people beside her stared blankly at this scene. Their bodies stiffened. This scene would be forever imprinted in their minds. It would probably be difficult to get rid of it for the rest of their lives. Rumble! Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and the hill exploded into nothingness. Even the dense fog organization's base disappeared completely. After doing all that, Zhuowen disappeared from this place. Was it an illusion? Ruoxin looked at the disappearing hill and Zhuowen and muttered in a low voice. But soon, Ruoxin heard a majestic voice in her mind. The dense fog organization's main base has been destroyed. There are still several branches in Southeast Asia and China. This is the map of the branches. It's enough to convince your superiors to send troops to destroy these branches. As soon as he finished speaking, Ruoxi discovered that several map images had appeared in her mind. These images were labeled with the addresses of the other branches of the fog organization. It wasn't an illusion. Then who was that person? When she recalled the figure who had destroyed the dense fog's base with a wave of his hand, a sense of melancholy arose in Rahi's heart. Above the clouds, Kong Ji's and Ruoxin is translation. In is translation is translation is translation is of translation is translation to translation is translation is translation in is translation. Back then, he had vaguely seen the evil deeds of the dense fog organization. To be honest, if it were not for the rules of the Huaxia continent, he would have taken action long ago. Now that Zhuowen was able to destroy the dense fog organization's base, Ruoxin translation felt relieved. After all, the dense fog organization was only an organization of mortals in the mortal world. Generally speaking, the experts of Huaxia continent were not allowed to intervene in this kind of matter. No matter how crazy the dense fog organization was, it was still a matter of the mortal world. Unfortunately, Taiching appeared and allowed Zhuowen to enter Earth and destroy the dense fog organization in one fell swoop. It could be said that he had made an exception for once. No matter how powerful the dense fog organization was, in front of a terrifying expert like Zhuowen, they were like ants. He could destroy them with a wave of his hand. "Brother Kong, let's go." Zhuowen rushed to Kong Gu and cupped his fist. Kong Gu nodded. Then, the two of them turned into two streams of light, broke through the sky, and rushed out of Earth's surface in an instant. On the Nine Suns shuttle, Taiching looked indifferently at the two figures rushing over and said with a smile, "You're quite fast. It's only been a day and you're already back." As he spoke, Zhuowen's spiritual energy clone rushed into the Nine Suns shuttle and landed not far away from his main body. At this moment, his main body was comprehending the fourth level of Dao meaning. Naturally, Zhuowen's clone would not disturb him. Taiching and Yuqing would not disturb him, let alone Yuza and the others. Time gradually passed. In a flash, 3 months had passed. During these 3 months, Zhuowen had been sitting cross-legged on the deck. Taiching and Yuqing were not in a hurry at all. They silently waited for Zhuowen to finish comprehending. After the incident on Earth, this kid's mental state has improved a lot. However, it's still a bit difficult for him to comprehend the fourth level of Dao meaning. Yuqing's eyes were like torches. He immediately saw Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged, with a pained expression on his face. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as if he was struggling with something. His mental state is still not enough. He can't overcome the remaining inner demons. Let me lend him a hand. Taiching's eyes narrowed slightly. Then, he pointed his right finger at Zhuowen's forehead. A stream of purple energy rushed from his sword finger into the depths of Zhuowen's forehead. After a while, the struggling expression on Zhuowen's face gradually calmed down. Moreover, it became much more peaceful. It was also at this moment that the Dao meaning around Zhuowen reached its peak. In the end, it underwent a qualitative change. During the process of the Tao meaning's qualitative change, the surrounding starry sky actually intertwined and distorted. The expressions of Yuza and the others, who stopped not far away from the Nine Suns shuttle, changed slightly. They all flew away from the intertwined and distorted starry sky and looked at the Nine Suns shuttle from afar. Purple intent. Looks like this kid has completely transformed his third-level Tao meaning into a fourth-level Tao meaning. What an unbelievable kid! Yuqing couldn't help but smile as he looked at the purple ripples in the surroundings. The formless ripples that originally filled Zhuowen's surroundings had completely changed. They were no longer transparent, and they were instead like purple energy. They coiled around Zhuowen and revolved around Zhuowen, causing him to seem mysterious and distant. After a Tao meaning attained the fourth level, it would undergo a qualitative change. The most direct manifestation of this qualitative change was that the formless ripples would form strands of purple intent. This strand of purple intent seemed like qi yet wasn't qi, and it was extremely peculiar. Zhuowen slowly stood up and cupped his fists towards Taiqing. "Thank you, Master." When he was comprehending the fourth-level Tao meaning, he was indeed troubled by his inner demons. In the end, if it wasn't for Taiqing's help, it was very likely that he would have failed to comprehend it. It was even to the extent that he might have suffered a backlash from the fourth-level Tao meaning. So, he was rather grateful towards Taiqing for lending a hand earlier. The corners of Taiqing's mouth held a smile as he said, "Now, you should follow me into the Taiqing immortal realm, right?" Zhuowen nodded and remained silent. When Taiqing saw this, he nodded towards Yuzhe, and then he steered the Nine Suns shuttle and transformed into a long streak of light that left Earth. The core of the Taiqing immortal realm was actually an incomparably enormous continent. This continent was so large that it was practically as large as an ordinary galaxy. This continent was enshrouded in a hazy mist. Moreover, within this mist, one could frequently see red-crowned cranes soaring in the sky, cheelants stepping on clouds, dragons coiling around, and auspicious beasts howling. It was a magnificent sight and charm of an immortal realm. This is the true core of the Taiqing immortal realm, and it's also where I live. Taiqing stood at the bow of the Nine Suns shuttle and pointed at the magnificent continent that resembled an immortal realm as he smiled at Zhuowen. Zhuowen silently looked at the enormous continent, and a trace of shock rose in his heart. Before he could react, the Nine Suns shuttle had already entered the continent, and then he felt an extremely dense immortal qi rush towards him. This immortal qi was much denser than the one deep under the heavenly armor planet, and even denser than any galaxy he had seen along the way. Just taking a breath made him feel comfortable and relaxed. The moment the Nine Suns shuttle entered the continent, the clouds above the continent churned, and red-crowned cranes opened a path on both sides of the Nine Suns shuttle, as if riding on the clouds. Countless beings on the continent all looked up, and their eyes were filled with reverence as they watched the Nine Suns shuttle fly past them. In the Taiqing immortal realm, there was no one who did not recognize the Nine Suns shuttle, because this Nine Suns shuttle was the mount of the Taiqing immortal realm's master, Taiqing. Soon, the Nine Suns shuttle landed in front of a mountain gate. This mountain gate was extremely magnificent, and it was made of crystal-clear white jade. In front of the mountain gate, 2 disciples in fluttering white robes stood respectfully. "Greetings, Patriarch!" "Greetings, Supremacy Yuqing!" The 2 white-robed disciples bowed and respectfully cupped their hands towards Taiqing and Yuqing. At the same time, they secretly sized up Zhuowen, who was standing beside Taiqing, and wondered about Zhuowen's identity. Taiqing nodded slightly, but he had no intention of introducing Zhuowen. He put away the Nine Suns shuttle and led Zhuowen and Yuqing towards the mountain. This mountain was extremely tall, and on the surface of the mountain, there were many buildings that were embedded in the mountain. Taiqing and the other 2 climbed to the highest point of the mountain, and on the peak of the mountain sat a large hall. This hall was called the Hall of Virtue, and it was also the hall where Taiching lived. With Taiching's status, Zhuowen originally thought that there would be many maids and servants in the hall, but he did not expect this hall to be exceptionally cold and cheerless. After passing through the empty door, there was a rather vast courtyard, and in the center of the courtyard stood a huge pill furnace. On the surface of the pill furnace, there was an image of a black and white fish, and at a glance, it gave off a cryptic and mysterious feeling. When Taiching brought Zhuowen and Yuqing to the courtyard where the pill furnace stood, the inside of the hall in front of the courtyard suddenly emitted an illusory immortal mist. This immortal mist kept changing, and in the end, it spread on the floor of the hall, forming a dense carpet of immortal qi. Walking along the carpet, a graceful young girl in a green dress walked out from within the hall. Her hair was like a waterfall that fluttered in the wind, and her exquisite and peerlessly beautiful face was like a piece of jade that had been carefully carved. When her hair fluttered in the wind, it added a sense of hazy spirituality, as if she was a fairy in a dream. Chapter 1894. Waxing and waning at the instant he saw this young woman, Zhuowen suddenly recalled the line, "This song should only exist in the heavens. How many times can one hear it in the mortal world?" Even though this young woman before him wasn't a song, the overflowing immortal aura she revealed could be used in this poem. It could be said that this woman should only exist in the heavens. How many times can one see it in the mortal world? It could be said that this woman's entire body revealed an indistinct immortal aura, and she was like a sparkling and translucent lotus that could only be admired from afar and not touched. Lian Meng greets Master and Martial Uncle Yuqing. The young woman walked slowly to the side of the pill furnace and bowed respectfully to Yuqing and Yuqing. At the same time, her beautiful eyes sized up Zhuowen, who stood by Yuqing's side. "Hee, little girl, you've already grown so big in the blink of an eye. Time really passes quickly." Yuqing chuckled as he walked towards Lianmeng, and his right hand intended to touch Lianmeng's head. Lianmeng wrinkled her beautiful nose and took a step with her right foot, yet she took a miraculous step and just happened to dodge Yuqing's right hand. Zhuowen's pupils couldn't help but constrict when he saw all of this. Yuqing's hand wasn't simple, and it contained a rather powerful law. If it was him, Zhuowen, then he would have to use a 4th-level Dao insight to dodge this hand. However, this young woman before him actually dodged Yuqing's hand so easily. Looks like this young woman isn't simple. Yuqing, don't mess around. Lian Meng doesn't like having her head touched by you. Yuqing stopped Yuqing, and then he arrived before Lian Meng and pointed at Zhuowen. "Lian Meng, he's Zhuowen. He'll be your junior brother from now on." Lian Meng sized up Zhuowen rather curiously, and then she curled her lips and said, "He's only at the initial stage of the heavenly god realm? Moreover, I see that his entire body is covered in the aura of death, and his vitality is ceaselessly flowing away. Obviously, he won't be able to live for long. Why would Master take in someone who's about to die?" Zhuowen furrowed his brows as he glanced at Lian Meng. He was unable to see through Lian Meng's cultivation. Clearly, the latter's cultivation was much higher than his. However, wasn't this girl's personality a little too straightforward? Grand Pure One did not mind and smiled at Zhuowen. "Zhuowen, don't mind him. Lian Meng has been living in the Hall of Virtue since he was young. He is pure and never beats around the bush." Yuqing also explained, "Lian Meng is even younger than you. She's only 18 years old this year." "Only 18 years old? Then her cultivation is—" Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he asked in disbelief. He could not see through Lian Meng's cultivation. It was clearly much higher than his, but she was actually younger than him. Wasn't she too much of a genius? Haha, this little girl just advanced to true God not long ago. Of course, the reason why her cultivation is so fast is largely due to her innate immortal physique. You must know that this little girl's cultivation was at true immortal the moment she was born. Grand Pure One laughed. Zhuowen was slightly shocked. Although he did not know what this so-called innate immortal physique was, hearing that Lian Meng was at true immortal the moment she was born, he knew that this immortal physique was probably extremely rare and powerful. At this moment, Zhuowen knew that outside of the heavenly armor continent, in the boundless starry sky, there were many people who were more talented than him. Moreover, the reason why Zhuowen's cultivation rose so fast was actually due to chance and luck. Among them, his heavenly god cultivation was forcefully raised by Taoist Song Long, who sacrificed himself. Moreover, it was only temporary. Lian Meng also saw the surprise in Zhuowen's eyes, and her beautiful eyes revealed a trace of complacency. Lian Meng, don't be complacent. Zhuowen has comprehended level 4 Dao meaning. Although his cultivation is not as good as yours, his comprehension is much stronger than yours. Grand Pure One laughed. What? He has comprehended level 4 Dao meaning? Lian Meng's beautiful eyes squinted as she stared at Zhuowen in an extremely cute manner. She thought that she would be able to see through Zhuowen with this stare, but she was unable to see anything. Alright, return to the Virtue Hall and cultivate first. I have some things to discuss with Zhuowen. Grand Pure One glanced at Lian Meng with a rather doting gaze. No, cultivating every day is truly too boring. I want to go out and play with senior sister Jing Hai and the others. Lian Meng puckered her lips, and then she left the Virtue Hall eagerly. A trace of amusement arose in Zhuowen's heart as he gazed at Lian Meng's figure that left. Every single action of Lian Meng is truly too childish, and he knew that it was related to Lian Meng's young age and lack of any cruel tempering. When he thought about how he'd risked his life to cultivate for so many years, yet his cultivation was still unable to compare to this young woman that was much younger than him, Zhuowen felt rather bitter in his heart. This is truly infuriating. After Lian Meng left the Virtue Hall, Grand Pure One brought Zhuowen into the hall, whereas Yu Qing was sent away by Grand Pure One. Within the dim hall, Grand Pure One had his hands behind his back as he silently gazed at the enormous stone statue before the hall. Zhuowen stood silently behind him in silence. Zhuowen, you must be very puzzled. I clearly know that your vitality is ceaselessly flowing away and you're dead for sure, yet I still took you as my disciple, right? Grand Pure One spoke abruptly, and his flat voice slowly reverberated within the hall. Zhuowen gazed calmly at Grand Pure One's figure, yet he didn't answer and still maintained his silence. You ought to have suspected that I probably have another objective for taking you as my disciple, right? Grand Pure One slowly turned around and stared calmly at Zhuowen before he continued. Could it be that you don't have anything to say? Zhuowen raised his head slightly and gazed into Grand Pure One's eyes as he smiled faintly. Master, I'm already endlessly grateful that you've helped me settle down the people of Heavenly Armor Continent. If there's anything you want me to do, I'll do it without hesitation. Grand Pure One's gaze became complicated as he nodded lightly and sighed. Zhuowen, Dao Intent was created by me. It can increase a cultivator's overall strength, and it can be said to be an extremely powerful support force. Although Dao Intent has a total of 9 levels, as the creator, I've actually only established the first 8 levels and have never been able to break through to the 9th level. At this point, a mocking smile appeared on Grand Pure One's face. Clearly, Grand Pure One was rather dissatisfied that he couldn't break through to the 9th level. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He didn't expect Grand Pure One, the creator of Dao Intent, to actually be unable to establish the 9th level of Dao Intent. At the same time, Zhuowen recalled that Grand Pure One had taken him in as his disciple because Zhuowen had comprehended 3 levels of Dao Intent. He knew that this was definitely inseparable from Dao Intent. Zhuowen didn't answer. He gazed silently at Grand Pure One because he knew Grand Pure One hadn't finished speaking. Grand Pure One continued. For the sake of establishing the 9th level of Dao Intent, I've tried many methods, but they were still useless. However, in the end, I found a rather extreme method, and it required me to completely observe the concept of the ninth level of Tao intent. Only in this way would I be able to completely comprehend the ninth level of Tao intent. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was slightly unable to understand Grand Pure One's words. Even Grand Pure One himself was unable to comprehend the ninth level of Tao intent, so how would he observe the concept of the ninth level of Tao intent? Isn't this nonsense? Grand Pure One noticed the bewilderment on Zhuowen's face as well. With a flick of his finger, countless strands of violet qi flashed out from the tip of his finger before condensing into a violet crystal above him. This violet crystal was enshrouded with misty violet qi, and it looked illusory and mysterious. Zhuowen stared at the violet crystal and instantly fell into a daze. But in next to no time, he recovered from his shock, and he stared at the violet crystal with a fearful gaze. This violet crystal is called Tao Insight Crystal, and it's a crystal that I condensed on my own after comprehending Tao insights for countless years. It contains all my comprehensions from the first level of Tao insight to the 8th level of Tao insight. As he spoke, Grand Pure One passed the violet crystal to Zhuowen and said, "Zhuowen, this Tao insight crystal contains the Tao I've comprehended. If others forcefully comprehend the 8th level Tao insight within it, then they'll fall into a muddle-headed state and very likely lose their minds. But only geniuses that have comprehended Tao insights are able to instantly attain the 8th level of Tao insight after absorbing this Tao insight crystal. Moreover, at the instant they attain the peak of the 8th level of Tao insight, they'll release a trace of 9th level Tao insight, and I'm doing this for the sake of that trace of 9th level Tao insight." Zhuowen received the violet crystal. Even though Grand Pure One spoke in an extremely obscure manner, Zhuowen was still able to discern the meaning behind Grand Pure One's words. Obviously, Grand Pure One wanted him to absorb this Tao insight crystal and forcefully advance his Tao insight to the 8th level, whereas the side effect was that he might be affected by the 8th level Tao insight and lose his mind. Zhuowen wasn't enraged nor was he sorrowful, and he only had tranquility like an ancient well. He looked at Grand Pure One and said, "Master, how much time do I have left?" Grand Pure One glanced at Zhuowen and sighed lightly. "You still have half a year. Even though my actions are indeed slightly inappropriate, but..." Zhuowen waved his hand instead and said, "Master, there's no need to say that. I know that Master pursues the ultimate Tao. Not to mention that this life of mine was saved by Master, so I'm extremely gratified to be able to do something for Master." When he spoke up to hear, Zhuowen spoke once more. "Master, is there anything in the Huaxia domain that can balance the yin and yang of the soul?" Grand Pure One's eyes flickered as he said solemnly, "Something that can balance the yin and yang of the soul? Our Huaxia domain only has the yin-yang fish that can balance the yin and yang of the body, but we don't have anything that can balance the yin and yang of the soul. This is already something that touches the depths of the soul, and it's extremely rare." Disappointment appeared in Zhuowen's eyes when he heard that. He naturally thought of Mu Qinshui when he asked this question. Back then, Elder Gu had said that Mu Qinshui's soul had used the profound soul ice crystal, causing her soul to have an excess of yin qi, causing her soul to become extremely weak. If he couldn't balance the yin and yang of the soul, he wouldn't be able to save Mu Qinshui at all. Now that the heaven domain was so vast, there were naturally many great figures who could save Mu Qinshui. However, the first and most crucial step now was to find the item that could balance the yin and yang of the soul. Even though the Huaxia domain doesn't have it, Master knows that the Dafa domain of the 8 heavens seems to have it, Grand Pure One suddenly said. "Where is it?" Zhuowen quickly asked. True Lord of Morality and Nothingness said, "There's an extremely famous perilous place in the Brahma domain. It's called Yin-Yang, Clear Moon, and Waning Moon. It's a lost galaxy, and every time Yin-Yang opens, the silhouettes of a Yin moon and a Yang sun will appear in its depths." Chapter 1895. Scripture Reserve Pavilion. Zhuowen's gaze grew brighter and brighter like the stars. Before he asked this question, Zhuowen still held perturbed feelings. After all, this was related to the key to saving Mu Qinshui. When he heard Sky Pure One say that there was no yin and yang object that could balance the yin and yang of the soul in the Huaxia heaven region, Zhuowen was extremely disappointed in his heart. But this disappointment transformed into hope when Sky Pure One said that the Sun-Moon herb was in the dangerous grounds of the Dafa heaven region. Dafa heaven region, Zhuowen clenched his fists tightly as he decided in his heart that if he had the chance, he would surely head to the dangerous grounds of the Dafa heaven region. Sky Pure One continued. Zhuowen, Master pursues the Tao of nature, and I'll let nature take its course. I'll absolutely not force anyone. If you feel it's inappropriate, then you can return the Tao Insight Crystal to Master, and you'll still be Master's disciple. Zhuowen waved his hand and said respectfully, Master has already done enough for me, so disciple ought to do something to repay Master. Since disciple only has half a year of time, then disciple will absorb this Tao Insight Crystal and release a trace of the energy of the 9th level Tao Insight after half a year has passed. But disciple hopes that Master is able to open the Scripture Reserve Pavilion to disciple within this half a year of time. I hope to truly understand this world before I die, and in this way, I can die without regret. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of Sky Pure One's mouth as he flicked his sleeve and withdrew a green jade token, and then he passed it to Zhuowen. This is the Sky Pure One Immortal Token. With this Sky Pure One Immortal Token, besides the restricted areas in the Sky Pure One Immortal Realm, you can enter and leave at will. Moreover, the exact map of the Sky Pure One Immortal Realm is within this Sky Pure One Immortal Token. After receiving the green jade token, Zhuowen cupped his fists to Sky Pure One, and then he left the Hall of Virtue. After Zhuowen left, Yu Qing had suddenly flashed into the hall, and he frowned slightly as he looked at Yu Qing and said in a low voice, Yu Qing, you really intend to allow Zhuowen to absorb the Tao Insight Crystals? This is truly, Grand Pure One said calmly. I didn't force Zhuowen. I just told him my thoughts. The decision is in Zhuowen's hands. Even if Zhuowen regrets it in the end, I will still treat him as my disciple. Half a year later, when his life force completely fades away, I will still take care of his corpse. Yu Qing shook his head instead and said, Never mind. Even though it's slightly against morality, it's worth it if it's able to allow you to comprehend 9th level Tao Insight. At that time, our Huaxia heavenly region will absolutely not mistreat those people from Heavenly Armor Continent. The Taiqing Immortal Realm was peaceful. Zhuowen turned into a stream of light and shuttled through the continent. The Taiqing Immortal Token contained a rather detailed map, and he could see the location of the Scripture Pavilion at a glance. Not long after, Zhuowen landed in front of a lush green valley. The valley was extremely large, and there was a clear and vast lake in the center of the valley. The surroundings of the valley were inlaid with wooden pavilions. The architectural style of these pavilions was grand and imposing, and it was quite shocking. All the buildings in the valley formed the enormous Scripture Pavilion. The collection of books inside was extremely rich, and it could be said that it knew everything about astronomy and geography. It almost contained most of the books in the entire Huaxia heavenly region. Zhuowen landed at the entrance of the valley and discovered that there were actually 2 huge black iron dragon heads embedded at the entrance of the valley. The dragon heads opened their mouths wide and spat out 2 waterfall-like streams of water. There weren't many people at the entrance of the valley, and he also discovered that most of the cultivators who entered the Scripture Pavilion were at the soul formation stage. Moreover, there were many existences that Zhuowen couldn't see through at all. It was obvious that their cultivations were much stronger than his. If I want to possess the infant devourer, I have to train my divine sense to be strong. Only in this way can I completely suppress the infant devourer's divine sense. Zhuowen thought to himself. His life force was still flowing away. Half a year was his limit. After half a year, he would definitely die. It was precisely because of this that Zhuowen agreed to let Taiqing absorb the Tao intent crystal without hesitation. How could a person who was about to die worry about losing his mind? Moreover, Zhuowen also wanted to return the favor he owed Taiqing by agreeing to this matter. When he was completely reborn in the infant devourer, then his relationship with Taiqing would be completely clear. Neither of them owed each other anything. Now that he still had half a year, he could use this half a year to prepare hard. When he was reborn, he would be able to successfully possess the infant devourer. The cultivators who entered the valley naturally saw Zhuowen, but most of them didn't care. After all, Zhuowen's aura was only at the early stage of the heavenly god realm. This could be said to be in existence at the middle or lower level in the Taiqing immortal realm. It was simply unworthy of their attention. Junior sister Lianmeng, you said that Honorable Taiqing has really taken a disciple? Impossible, right? Honorable Taiqing has only taken you as his disciple for so many years. Now he's actually made an exception and taken a second one? Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded from behind, and Zhuowen's heart shook slightly. He didn't need to turn around to know that this junior sister Lianmeng should be the young woman in a green dress in the Hall of Virtue. However, Zhuowen didn't really want to have too much contact with Lianmeng. He only had half a year in the Taiqing immortal realm, and he didn't want to get too involved with the people and matters here. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen raised his foot and walked towards the entrance of the valley. It's him. He's Master's new disciple. I remember that he's called Zhuowen. Senior sister Jinghai, stop him! Not long after that gentle voice sounded, Lianmeng's clear and melodious voice sounded, and there was a trace of abruptness in her voice. Zhuowen's gaze was slightly gloomy. As if he didn't hear anything, he continued to walk towards the entrance of the valley. Unfortunately, a beautiful figure blocked his path like a ghost. The woman who appeared before Zhuowen was around 25 or 26 years old. Her eyebrows were picturesque, her lips were red, her small face was like a goose egg, and her thin yet voluptuous body gave off a tranquil and elegant aura when paired with her pink clothes that fluttered in the wind. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He glanced at the woman before him and said, "Senior sister, what's the matter? Why are you blocking my path?" At the same time, Lianmeng, who was standing behind Zhuowen, brought two young men with her and arrived beside the sweet-looking woman. They began to size up Zhuowen. "Zhuowen, why didn't you stop when I called you just now?" Lianmeng said with some dissatisfaction. As for the gentlewoman, she sized up Zhuowen with her beautiful eyes. However, she didn't find anything special about Zhuowen. Instead, she discovered that Zhuowen's body was surrounded by an aura of death. Like Lianmeng, she could see that Zhuowen wouldn't live for long. She was very surprised. Not to mention that Zhuowen's cultivation was so low, just the aura of death lingering around his body was enough to show that he was someone who was about to die. Why would Honorable Taiqing accept such a person as his disciple? The gentlewoman couldn't understand Honorable Taiqing's thoughts. Zhuowen cupped his hands towards Lianmeng and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Greetings, senior sister." Junior brother was thinking about something just now and did not hear senior sister's voice. I hope senior sister does not take offense. Please forgive me. Seeing Zhuowen's good attitude, Lianmeng's expression eased up. She smiled and said, "Do you also want to enter the scripture pavilion? But let me tell you, you must have the Taiqing immortal token to enter. You just entered the Taiqing immortal realm, so Master shouldn't have given you the Taiqing immortal token yet, right? Follow behind me later, senior sister will bring you into the scripture pavilion. How about it?" Lianmeng patted her chest and said. Seeing Lianmeng being so enthusiastic, Zhuowen couldn't refuse. He nodded slightly and didn't say anything. She is senior sister Jinghai, the disciple of the Ninth Sky Hall's Hall Master. Her cultivation is much stronger than mine. Lianmeng hugged the gentlewoman beside her and smiled. Zhuowen's eyelids trembled. Honorable Taiching had told him about the ninth sky hall before. In the continent of the Taiching immortal realm, there were various forces, and these forces were represented by the halls. Among them, the Virtue Hall was where Honorable Taiching lived and was the leader of all the halls. The ninth sky hall was only below the Virtue Hall. It had many disciples, and its hall master, Ninth Sky, was said to have an unfathomable cultivation and was incomparably powerful. Zhuowen cupped his hands towards Jing Hai. He didn't show enough enthusiasm. Zhuowen's attitude caused Jing Hai to involuntarily frown slightly. Her beauty was definitely one of the best in the celestial realm of grand clarity. She should be on par with Lianmeng and was extremely famous in the celestial realm of grand clarity. Jing Hai's cultivation was clearly much better. She didn't care too much about Zhuowen's attitude. However, the two young men who came with Lianmeng were a little displeased. The two young men were also disciples of the Ninth Sky Hall. However, their status in the Ninth Sky Hall was much lower than Jing Hai's. This time, they came with Jing Hai. Not only was Jing Hai's cultivation high, she was also gentle and charming. She was the object of their admiration for a long time. Now that Zhuowen was being so indifferent, the two of them were naturally displeased. Senior Sister Lianmeng, what kind of existence is Honorable Taiching? You are an innate immortal physique with peerless talent. It's only natural that you would be accepted as a disciple by Honorable Taiching. However, this person is only an early-stage heavenly god. Moreover, he looks very ordinary. How could Honorable Taiching accept someone like him as a disciple? Did someone use some underhanded means to make Honorable Taiching choose him? A man with a sharp nose sneered. Yang Tong is right. How could someone like Honorable Taiching accept a piece of trash? Moreover, this person is about to die. He's basically a piece of trash plus a dead person. Accepting someone like him is simply a disgrace to the Virtue Hall's reputation, the other round-faced man said bluntly. Zhuowen looked coldly at the two young men. Their cultivation bases were pretty good. The round-faced man was probably a mid-stage heavenly god, while the man with a sharp nose was a late-stage heavenly god. The two of them echoed each other. Their words were extremely unpleasant to hear. Yang Tong, by Shuang, enough. Jing Hai's pretty face was gloomy as she stopped them. No matter how bad Zhuowen was, he was still Honorable Taiching's disciple. It wasn't their place to gossip. Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's faces were slightly sluggish. However, they were submissive and no longer spoke. Clearly, they were quite convinced by Jing Hai. Junior brother Zhuowen, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang didn't mean it. I hope you don't mind, Jing Hai said as she looked at Zhuowen meticulously. Zhuowen nodded slightly. Then, he looked at Lianmeng and said, Senior sister, can you take me into the scripture pavilion now? I really don't like these two flies. Can we go in alone? Chapter 1896. 8 heavenly domains. Yang Tong and Bai Shuang were brought into the scripture pavilion this time because of Jing Hai's help. The scripture pavilion was a very important place in the grand pure immortal realm. Only those with the grand pure immortal token or the upper echelons of the various halls were allowed to enter. Only the grand pure immortal token was possessed by the various hall masters of the grand pure immortal realm. Generally, it would be bestowed to the most talented disciple of the hall. Jing Hai's talent was pretty good and she was quite strong, but she still wasn't qualified to obtain the grand pure immortal token. This time, if it weren't for Lianmeng, it would be very difficult for Jing Hai to enter the scripture pavilion, let alone Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. Now, Zhuowen, a mere early-stage heavenly god, actually encouraged Lianmeng to forbid them from entering. Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's eyes were extremely cold, and they sneered in their hearts. Lianmeng and Jing Hai's relationship was very good. She had promised Jing Hai that she would bring them into the scripture pavilion, so they weren't very worried that Lianmeng would listen to Zhuowen. Lianmeng glanced at Zhuowen, then at Yang Tong and Bai Shuang who were sneering in their hearts. She nodded and said, These two are really annoying. I won't bring them in. Senior sister Jinghai, let's go in together. As she spoke, Lian Meng pulled Jinghai and walked toward the entrance of the valley. As for Zhuowen, he silently followed behind them. Jinghai originally wanted to say something, but seeing Lian Meng's actions, she knew that Lian Meng really didn't intend to let Yang Tong and Bai Shuang in. Although Zhuowen's condition wasn't good, he was still a disciple of the grand pure immortal realm. Yang Tong and Bai Shuang had a relationship with Lian Meng. Even if Zhuowen's condition wasn't good, it wasn't their turn to say anything. Looking at the backs of the three people leaving, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang stood in place in a daze. Soon after, their faces turned green and white. Damn it, it's all that damn Zhuowen's fault. Yang Tong's gaze was somewhat vicious as he stared at Zhuowen's back. Bai Shuang's face was gloomy as he looked at Yang Tong. Honorable Taiching's recruitment of a disciple must have caused a commotion in the Taiching immortal realm. However, we still don't know that Honorable Taiching has recruited another disciple. I don't believe that this person is Honorable Taiching's disciple. Yang Tong looked at Bai Shuang and his eyes flickered. Brother Bai, do you mean to teach this boy a lesson? What if he really was Honorable Taiching's disciple? After all, Lian Meng's attitude towards Zhuowen is somewhat unusual. Bai Shuang sneered. He's just an early-stage heavenly god. So what if he's Honorable Taiching's disciple? Honorable Taiching follows the laws of nature. As long as we don't kill him and teach him a lesson, Honorable Taiching won't stand up for him. Yang Tong's eyes narrowed slightly as he nodded. Brother Bai is right. This boy doesn't know when to back down. He really needs to be taught a good lesson. After this boy comes out of the scripture pavilion, we will wait for him to learn how to behave. After the two discussed for a while, they found a rather secluded forest outside the scripture pavilion, intending to wait for Zhuowen to leave the scripture pavilion. There was a guard standing at the entrance of the valley. After Lian Meng took out the Taiching immortal token, she easily passed through. However, Zhuowen found that the Taiching immortal token that Lian Meng took out was somewhat different from his. Lian Meng's Taiching immortal token had a silver bar drawn in the center of the jade color, while Honorable Taiching gave Zhuowen a gold bar. Zhuowen, this scripture pavilion only has 4 floors. Each floor is very large and contains the essence of China's heavenly domain. Everything you want is inside. Lian Meng introduced to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded slightly as he asked, Senior sister, does the scripture pavilion have secret techniques for tempering the divine soul and enhancing the divine sense? Lian Meng smiled and said, Of course there are such secret techniques. Let me introduce them to you. Of the 4 floors of the scripture pavilion, the first floor is for cultivators below the heavenly god realm to study. The second floor contains divine abilities, secret techniques, and various other materials of the heavenly god realm. The third floor is for the true god realm, and the 4th floor is for the void sky realm. Even I can't enter the 4th floor. Generally, those who can enter the 4th floor are the void sky old monsters of the Taiching immortal realm, or those who hold the gold rank Taiching immortal token. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He suddenly thought of the difference between his Taiching immortal token and Lian Meng's. Could it be that the Taiching immortal token in his hand was the gold rank Taiching immortal token that Lian Meng mentioned? Come, let's go inside. Lian Meng smiled as she led Zhuowen and Jinghai into the scripture pavilion. Along the way, Jinghai was silent. Moreover, when she looked at Zhuowen, there was a hint of hostility in her eyes. Zhuowen also knew that Jinghai's expression should be related to what he said outside the valley. However, he couldn't be bothered to say anything to Jinghai. Right now, he only wanted to find the corresponding secret techniques related to tempering the soul and divine sense in the scripture pavilion in order to prepare to possess the body of an infant. He was merely a passerby in the Taiching immortal realm. The first floor of the scripture pavilion had the most people. After the 3 of them entered the second floor, the number of people decreased. Junior brother Joie, you can take a look at the second floor. There are various divine abilities and secret techniques here. There should be a secret technique that you want. After arriving at the second floor, Lian Meng said this to Zhuowen before leading Jing Hai to the third floor. The silver rank Taiching immortal token in Lian Meng's hand was enough for them to enter the third floor. Zhuowen didn't follow Lian Meng to the third floor. After all, he was a heavenly god. If he followed Lian Meng to the third floor, it would probably cause trouble. Of course, if he really wanted to enter the third floor, he had a Taiching immortal token on him. He could use the Taiching immortal token to enter the third or even the fourth floor of the scripture pavilion. The area of the second floor was still very large. However, the number of books here was much less than the first floor. The heavenly deities were no longer using immortal techniques, but divine abilities. After all, immortal techniques relied on immortal energy. However, heavenly gods didn't have immortal energy in their bodies, but star god energy. Using star god energy to cast immortal techniques was obviously inappropriate. Zhuowen didn't have any divine abilities. The only one he had was the slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs. This slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs was upgraded from an immortal technique to a divine ability by relying on Taoist Song Long's soul when he advanced to the heavenly god realm. Moreover, the slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs should be the lowest level divine ability. However, Zhuowen valued the slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs' plasticity. He was very clear that since the slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs could evolve from an immortal technique to a divine ability, then it might be able to evolve into a true divine ability in the future. It might even become a void heaven divine ability along with him. Zhuowen slowly walked around the second floor and constantly browsed through the books on the bookshelf. He discovered that the divine abilities here were divided into several categories. For example, there were offensive divine abilities, defensive divine abilities, and movement divine abilities. Other than divine abilities, there were also secret techniques recorded on bamboo slip. Zhuowen also saw some introductions to the 8 heavens, as well as the geographical records of each heavens. Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry to look for divine abilities and secret techniques, and he carefully looked through the geographical knowledge that introduced the 8 great heavens instead. With Zhuowen's current memories and the comprehension ability that was overlapped by 4-level Dao insights, Zhuowen quickly finished reading the introduction within. The 8 heavens were Sakyamuni, Tusita heavens, 6 desires heavens, Brahma heavens, limitless heavens, Yama heavens, Mahasvara heavens, and the Huaxia heavens he was in. From the introductions in the bamboo slips, Sakyamuni was the strongest among the 8 heavens. Sakyamuni was also slightly stronger than the other 7 heavens. As for how much stronger he was, the bamboo slips didn't record it in detail. Sakyamuni Zhuowen couldn't help but clench his fists when he recalled the strength of the Nadi Shiva's projection. Sakyamuni was a void heaven rank expert. Perhaps 10,000 years was just a blink of an eye to him, but it was an endless calamity to the heavenly armor continent. It was because of Sakyamuni that the heavenly armor planet experienced 2 calamities. In the end, Zhuowen and many of the heavenly armor continent's inhabitants were forced to leave the heavenly armor continent. Moreover, the deaths of Fuxi, Cangjie, and the others were also caused by Sakyamuni. Sakyamuni viewed all of them as ants, but Zhuowen would let Sakyamuni know that he, an ant, would one day ascend to the void heaven rank and be on the same level as him. He would let Sakyamuni know that the ant he looked down on back then had the power and potential to destroy him. Zhuowen flipped through the records in the bamboo slips again, and discovered that in the vast and boundless universe, aside from the 8 heavens, the universe that occupied the most space was actually the outer realm. The starry skies outside the heavens were almost boundless. There were abandoned stars and broken galaxies scattered everywhere. The life planets of the 8 heavens that had declined would be thrown into the starry skies by the powerhouses of the heavens. Therefore, in the 8 heavens, the outer space had a joking name, and that was the heavens' garbage dump. This was because it was filled with too many abandoned stars. It was a place used to fill up the abandoned stars of the 8 heavens. Devour, whom Zhuowen was familiar with, was born in outer space. The bamboo slips had a brief introduction about Devour. It could be said that Devour specialized in swallowing planets to absorb energy. He was the natural enemy of countless planets and galaxies in the 8 heavens. Once Devour was found in the heavens, the powerhouses of the heavens would gather to attack him. The starry skies outside the heavens were too vast. Besides Devour's name, the bamboo slips also briefly explained that there should be other existences similar to Devour in the farthest reaches of the starry skies. However, they were too far away, and no one had ever been there. It was just the speculation of some heavens lords. Besides, Zhuowen also paid attention to the Great Brahma Domain. He found that the Great Brahma Domain was ranked last among the 8 heavens, and it was much weaker than the other 7 heavens. He also saw the location of the yin-yang clear moon crescent moons in the bamboo slip. The yin-yang clear moon crescent moons had a great reputation in the Great Brahma Domain. It was said that it was one of the 10 most dangerous places in the Great Brahma Domain. There were divine treasures that could move many heavenly gods. Chapter 1897. Gold-grade Taiching, Immortal Tokenjuan. Carefully read the description of the Dafen domains yin, clear, round, and crescent. After memorizing the characteristics of the yin, clear, round, and crescent, he put the bamboo slip back on the bookshelf. The heavenly domains were too vast. Generally, if one wanted to travel through the starry sky, they would need the corresponding star map. The bamboo slip didn't contain the star map of the Dafen domain, let alone the specific location of the yin, clear, round, and crescent. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to go to the yin, clear, round, and crescent, he had to enter the Dafen domain and find a way to get the star map. However, the bamboo slip did provide a rough description of the star map of the 8 heavenly domains. Zhuowen secretly memorized the star map in his mind. After he completely possessed the infant Devour, he would be able to go directly to the Dafen domain from the extraterritorial starry sky. After that, Zhuowen began to look at the other divine abilities. There were many divine abilities on the 2nd level. Zhuowen roughly glanced through them and roughly knew what the divine abilities on the 2nd level were. Dazzling Light Secret Record, Blue Flame Great Art, Immortal Vanquishing Art, Purple Sutra, Bright King Treasure Art, 9 Destruction Purple Shadows, Celestial Body Suppressing Universe. There were offensive, defensive, and movement types among these divine abilities. Among them, most of the defensive divine abilities were body-refining divine abilities. Zhuowen's Myriad Tao Indestructible Divine Body could also be a divine ability if it was the complete version. Unfortunately, the Myriad Tao Indestructible Divine Body couldn't become a real divine body. It could only become a demigod body. It could be said that the divine abilities here were much more advanced than the immortal arts and body-refining divine abilities that Zhuowen had cultivated before. Moreover, all of them were complete versions. They were much more powerful than the immortal arts and secret techniques that the ancestors of the Heavenly Armor continent had explored. Seeing so many divine abilities all of a sudden, Zhuowen's emotions surged, but he didn't lose his mind. He was very clear that there should be higher-level true divine abilities on the 3rd level, and there might even be void sky divine abilities on the 4th level that were even more powerful and mysterious than true divine abilities. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to choose a divine ability. He knew very well that it took time to comprehend a divine ability, and he only had half a year's time. Therefore, he had to choose carefully. Only when he chose a truly suitable divine ability could he unleash its strongest power. In addition to divine abilities, Zhuowen found that there were very few secret arts in this place that could temper one's soul and enhance one's spiritual energy. Even if there were, they were extremely low level, and Zhuowen simply didn't care about them. Let's go to the 3rd floor. Putting down the book beside him, Zhuowen walked towards the stairs leading to the 3rd level. Although there weren't many people on the second floor, there were still quite a number of them. Zhuowen's journey to the third floor naturally attracted the attention of many people. Moreover, it also caused quite a commotion. It wasn't strange for them to enter the third floor, but it was strange for an early-stage divine god to want to go to the third floor. Does this kid not know the rules? Divine gods aren't allowed to enter the third floor. Even if he has the Tai Ching Immortal token, I'm afraid he only has access to the second floor. His cultivation isn't high enough. This kid is going to be defeated. The administrator of the third floor has a bad temper. Sounds of ridicule rose from the surroundings, but no one stopped Zhuowen. They had stayed on the second level for quite a long time, and it was indeed quite boring at times. They were naturally extremely happy to be able to watch some fun. A woman in black tights was leaning against the stairs. She looked to be in her 30s, and her body exuded a mature charm. At this moment, the woman was lazily leaning against the stairs. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, and her expression was extremely lazy. Perhaps it was because she saw Zhuowen she lazily opened her eyes and sized up Zhuowen. Then, she casually waved her hand and said, "Early stage heavenly god brat, I want to rest now. Don't disturb me. Scram as far away as you can." Zhuowen looked at the lazy woman. He didn't expect her to be so rude, but he didn't take it to heart. He said indifferently, "I want to enter the third floor." The woman tilted her head and opened her eyes. An invisible pressure pressed down on Zhuowen like a ferocious tiger. Zhuowen couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end, as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. "Brat, say that again." The woman stared at Zhuowen. She clenched her fists as if she was warning Zhuowen. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He took out the Tai Ching Immortal token and tossed it to the woman. "I'm not speaking without thinking. This is the Tai Ching Immortal token. It proves that I have the right to enter the third floor." The woman took the Tai Ching Immortal token. Her eyes landed on the gold bar in the center of the token. Her pupils constricted, and then she became serious. She glanced at Zhuowen in surprise and said, "You actually have a gold-grade Tai Ching Immortal token? Where did you steal it?" Zhuowen said mockingly, "I'm just an early-stage heavenly god brat. Do you think I have the ability to steal this Tai Ching Immortal token?" The woman blushed and clapped her hands awkwardly. Then, she returned the Tai Ching Immortal token to Zhuowen and said, "Since you have a gold-grade Tai Ching Immortal token, you can go in." After taking back the Tai Ching Immortal token, Zhuowen directly entered the third floor, leaving behind the stunned people on the second floor. A mere early-stage heavenly god can obtain a gold-grade Tai Ching Immortal token. Where did this kid come from? The woman frowned and murmured softly. As he walked up the stairs, Zhuowen glanced at the Tai Ching Immortal token in his hand. He knew that the Tai Ching Immortal token had probably been given to him as a favor. He could not help but smile bitterly inside. Although it's natural, I have no choice but to return this favor. There were very few people on the third floor. There were only a dozen or so people, and most of them were cultivating their true divine abilities with their eyes closed. The only people moving about on the third floor were probably Lian Meng and Jing Hai. As Lian Meng had only become a true god recently, and Jing Hai did not have a silver Tai Ching Immortal token, it was the first time the two of them had entered the third floor. When they saw that the third floor actually had a dazzling array of true divine abilities, the two of them became extremely excited. They constantly looked around the third floor. When Zhuowen slowly walked up the stairs and arrived on the third floor, he immediately attracted the attention of Lian Meng and Jing Hai. "Junior brother Zhuowen, how did you get up here?" Lian Meng looked at Zhuowen in surprise. As for Jing Hai, she also looked at Zhuowen in surprise. Soon after, she frowned and said, "Zhuowen, did you not know the rules? Did you take advantage of the negligence of the third floor's administrator to sneak up? If that's really the case, you'd better get lost now. Otherwise, you won't have a chance to hide later." Zhuowen glanced at Jing Hai indifferently. Soon after, he greeted Lian Meng and began to walk around the third floor. He began to browse the true divine abilities here. Seeing Zhuowen ignore her, Jing Hai was furious. She then recalled that Yang Tong and Bai Shuang were also unable to enter the scripture pavilion because of this kid. For a moment, Jing Hai was enraged. She almost lost her reason and shouted, "You're just an early-stage heavenly god brat. How can you be qualified to enter the third floor? You violated the rules and even ignored my advice. Do you even know shame?" "Senior sister Jing Hai, don't be so loud," Lian Meng's face flickered. Originally, the others on the third floor were all cultivating with their eyes closed. Now that Jing Hai had made such a ruckus, it would likely attract the attention of others. If this matter were to blow up, Zhuowen would really be punished. This was something that Lian Meng did not want to see. Seeing Jing Hai's actions, Zhuowen sneered inwardly. He was certain that Jing Hai had deliberately shouted. Her goal was likely to attract the attention of the others on the third floor. Then, she would be able to catch him, the one who had snuck up. As expected, right after Jing Hai said that, several cultivators on the third floor who were closest to them opened their eyes. All of them turned to look at Zhuowen. One of the cultivators, a middle-aged man with a robust body, stood up and walked before the three of them. With a frown, he said, "This place forbids noise. Are you fellows knowingly breaking the rules?" Jing Hai hastily bowed and said, "Senior brother, I am Jing Hai from Nine Firmaments Palace. Earlier, I was too excited and shouted out. I hope you do not mind." After hearing that Jing Hai was a disciple of Nine Firmaments Palace, the middle-aged man's face eased slightly. Next, his gaze fell upon Zhuowen. His face sank as he said, "What is your name? Who allowed you to come up to the third floor?" Jing Hai hastily explained, "Senior brother, please do not take offense. This is our junior brother. When we brought him to the scripture depository, we had already instructed him to view the magic skills on the second floor. Unexpectedly, he took advantage of the fact that the manager was not paying attention to sneak up to the third floor. We will have him go down immediately." Lian Meng was relatively naive. When she heard Jing Hai's explanation, she thought that Jing Hai was trying to help. She quickly said, "Senior brother, this junior brother of mine does not know the rules. I hope you do not take offense." Zhuowen coldly looked at all of this. How could he not see through Jing Hai's explanation? His objective was to smear his name. As for Lian Meng, she was too naive. She was unable to see through Jing Hai's intentions. In the end, she ended up being more of a hindrance than a help. This caused Zhuowen to feel both angry and amused. Sure enough, after Jing Hai and Lian Meng's explanation, the middle-aged man's face immediately darkened. Preposterous. This kid sure has guts. He does not have the extreme purity immortal token and his cultivation base is only at the early heavenly god stage. Yet, he dares to come to the third floor? I will have to talk to the manager of the fourth floor about this. Immediately, the middle-aged man disappeared. Not long after, the middle-aged man returned with a white-haired old man. "Tomb Master, this is the one who broke the rules and sneaked up to the third floor without permission," said the middle-aged man as he pointed at Zhuowen. "It's not like what he said. It's really junior brother Zhuo's first time here. He doesn't know the rules. I hope the two of you can spare him this time." Lian Meng was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. The old man glanced at Zhuowen indifferently. Zhuowen suddenly felt as if he had been seen through from head to toe. Jing Hai looked at this scene coldly. She knew that Zhuowen would inevitably be driven out of the scripture depository. She was venting the anger of Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. Tomb Master retracted his gaze and smiled at Zhuowen. "Little brother, do you want to go to the fourth floor to have a look?" Chapter 1898. Void Sky Grey Divine Ability. Tomb Master, are you joking? He's just an early-stage heavenly god brat. How can he be qualified to go to the fourth floor? The middle-aged man hurriedly said. Jing Hai and Lian Meng also revealed strange expressions. Clearly, they also thought the tomb master was joking. The tomb master's gaze suddenly became serious. He coldly stared at the middle-aged man, and a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. The middle-aged man's heart thumped wildly, and he involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. His face was pale. The aura released by the tomb master was clearly targeted at him. He also realized that he had said the wrong thing. The tomb master was the manager of the 4th floor of the Scripture Pavilion. His status was extremely high. It was said that he was also a void sky grade expert. He even heard that the tomb master had an extremely strange temper. Even some void sky old monsters who wanted to enter the 4th floor had to see the tomb master's expression and mood. From this, it could be seen how eccentric the tomb master's personality was. Moreover, even those void sky old monsters didn't dare to provoke the tomb master. It was clear that the tomb master wasn't simple. However, a tomb master who didn't even put void sky old monsters in his eyes was now openly inviting an early-stage heavenly god junior. How could the middle-aged man not be shocked? Jing Hai and Lianmeng also finally reacted. The tomb master wasn't joking. The two women looked at Zhuowen with strange and astonished gazes. Jing Hai, in particular, had a bad feeling. She didn't expect Zhuowen to be favored by this eccentric tomb master. She really couldn't understand. Zhuowen's gaze was calm. He knew that the tomb master's gaze just now should have detected the gold-grade Tai Ching immortal token on him. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that the tomb master was clearly a void sky expert. Logically speaking, the tomb master's attitude towards him was a bit too good. He didn't think that a mere gold-grade Tai Ching immortal token could make a void sky expert smile at a mere early-stage heavenly god like him. What? Don't you want to take a look at the 4th floor? The tomb master looked at Zhuowen and smiled faintly. Zhuowen came back to his senses and respectfully cupped his fists at the tomb master. Thank you, senior. The tomb master was quite satisfied with Zhuowen's attitude. He smiled and nodded, then led Zhuowen to the 4th level. When Zhuowen entered the staircase to the 4th level, the tomb master turned around to look at the middle-aged man and Jing Hai. With his powerful spiritual sense, he had already noticed what was happening here. Jing Hai and the middle-aged man were clearly trying to force Zhuowen out of the Scripture Pavilion. The middle-aged man and Jing Hai felt a chill in their hearts when they sensed Tomb Master's gaze. Soon after, Tomb Master's voice sounded in their ears. The two of you don't need to come to the Scripture Pavilion anymore. After speaking, the two of them felt their bodies float in the air. Then, they appeared outside the entrance of the Scripture Depository Valley. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. Then, he looked coldly at Jing Hai, who was at a loss, and said coldly, "I will remember today's kindness." After he finished speaking, the middle-aged man flicked his sleeve and left without waiting for Jing Hai to speak. Jing Hai's pretty face was pale. This time, she really suffered a double loss. Not only was she kicked out of the Scripture Pavilion, but she also offended a true god who was more powerful than her. The loss outweighed the gain. Zhuowen, Jing Hai bit her lower lip. Her beautiful eyes revealed a touch of resentment. At the same time, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, who were not far from the entrance of the valley, saw Jing Hai appear outside the valley and rushed to her side. "Senior sister Jing Hai, what's wrong with you? You just entered the Scripture Pavilion and you came out?" Yang Tong asked in surprise. Jing Hai's pretty face was slightly gloomy, but she didn't say anything. She took a step and turned into a rainbow and left the place. In front of Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, she couldn't say that she was kicked out. It was really difficult for her to say it. Looking at Jing Hai leaving, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang were even more confused. Obviously, they didn't understand Jing Hai's situation. "Brother Yang, senior sister Jing Hai has left. Are we still going to wait here for Zhuowen?" Bai Shuang asked hesitantly. "Wait, why not wait? I must teach that Zhuowen a lesson. Otherwise, the anger in my heart will not be appeased." Yang Tong said as he returned to the dense forest outside the valley. Bai Shuang shrugged her shoulders and waited for Zhuowen. After entering the 4th floor, the tomb master stopped at the entrance and suddenly said, "Little friend, Honorable Taiching specifically told me to let you freely enter the 4th floor of the scripture pavilion. The void heaven divine ability is hidden here. If you want to cultivate it, you can do so at any time. And if you don't understand anything, you can come and ask me. I will be at the entrance of the stairs." After saying that, the tomb master left the entrance. Zhuowen showed a look of realization. He finally knew that the tomb master's attitude towards him was so good. It seemed that Honorable Taiching had informed him in advance. Looking around the 4th floor, Zhuowen found that the space of the 4th floor was really large, but at a glance it was all empty bookshelves. In the center of the 4th floor, there was a cylindrical bookshelf. On this strange bookshelf, there were only 5 ancient books, which were also the only 5 ancient books on the 4th floor. These 5 books were the Destruction Tao Swordsmanship, Indestructible Heaven and Earth, Torch Dragon 9-Headed Infants, Formless All Beings, and Celestial Star Meditation Diagram. Among them, Destruction Tao Sword Art was an offensive divine ability, Indestructible Yellow was a defensive divine ability, and Torch Dragon 9-Headed Infant was a movement divine ability. Zhuowen didn't need to look at these 3 divine abilities to know their respective categories. The remaining Formless All Life and Stars Meditation Diagram were beyond Zhuowen's expectations. Formless All Life was an extremely powerful concealment divine ability. Zhuowen looked at the introduction page of this Formless All Life quite seriously and found that the effect of this Formless All Life was actually quite similar to the concealment technique he cultivated before. However, Formless All Life was a Void Sky Realm divine ability. If he used Formless All Life, cultivators below the virtual sky world would simply be delusional to see through Zhuowen's cultivation level and aura. Even some ordinary virtual sky world cultivators wouldn't be able to see through Zhuowen's disguise so easily. Of course, if it were terrifying virtual sky world cultivators like Honorable Taiching and Sakyamuni, even if Zhuowen cultivated a powerful secret technique like Formless All Life, he would probably be seen through at a glance. However, in the 8 major heavens, existences like Honorable Taiching and Sakyamuni, who were considered powerful in the virtual sky world, were very rare. Therefore, it should be more than enough for Zhuowen to completely disguise himself by cultivating Formless All Life. In addition to a powerful concealment technique, Formless All Life also had a powerful illusion technique. This illusion technique could instantly drag cultivators whose divine sense was similar to or weaker than the caster into an illusion, making it difficult for them to move freely. As for Star's meditation diagram, it was a divine ability that tempered one's divine sense to improve one's divine sense. This kind of divine ability was to visualize one's divine sense as the vast starry sky and one's divine sense as the stars in the starry sky. As one continued to visualize, one could derive a vast starry sky in one's divine sense. It was an extremely powerful divine sense tempering technique. Furthermore, Zhuowen discovered that the celestial star meditation diagram and all life formless complemented each other. The stronger his soul was, the more terrifying the illusions he could cast through all life formless would be. When the time came, he could often rely on illusions to restrain the enemy, or even kill them in one strike. It could be said that the 5 ancient books on the 4th floor could be considered extremely powerful divine abilities in the entire heaven realm. Of course, Zhuowen also knew that the Huaxia heaven realm was so big that it couldn't only have these 5 divine abilities. The only possibility was that the Grand Pure One had left these 5 void heaven-grade divine abilities on the 4th floor as a form of compensation for Zhuowen. What a coincidence, every type of divine ability is listed on the 4th floor. Does Master know that I can be resurrected and that I urgently need this kind of divine ability to temper my divine sense? Zhuowen slowly took a few steps back and silently looked at the bookshelf in front of him. It could be said that the fourth floor basically provided the divine abilities he needed, and it looked like it was specially made for him. Zhuowen suspected that all of this was deliberately arranged by Honorable Taiqing. After thinking for a moment, Zhuowen stopped thinking about it. The gap between him and Honorable Taiqing was too big, and Honorable Taiqing was even more unfathomable. If Zhuowen wanted to fathom Honorable Taiqing's thoughts, he would basically be at a loss. Therefore, he simply stopped thinking about it and began to read the 5 ancient books. The 5 divine powers were all void heaven-grade divine powers, so it was impossible for Zhuowen to fully comprehend them. However, Zhuowen could learn these 5 divine powers to the entry level, which was more than enough for him to use. As for the in-depth content of the 5 ancient books, Zhuowen planned to forcibly memorize it so that it would be convenient for him to cultivate in the future. In order to strengthen his memory, Zhuowen even used the 4th layer Tao intent, causing his memory to increase by 4 times. Even so, Zhuowen still found it difficult to memorize. Void heaven-grade divine abilities were too difficult to understand for Zhuowen, who was only a heavenly deity. Moreover, there was no pattern to follow, so he could only memorize them. At the entrance of the staircase, the tomb master quietly leaned against the wall. As if he had sensed something, he raised his head and glanced at the entrance above. He said indifferently, "It really is the 4th layer Tao intent." To be able to comprehend the 4th layer Tao intent at such a young age is truly commendable. Unfortunately, this little fellow's fortune is too shallow. He only has half a year to live. Could it be that the heavens are jealous of his talent? At this point, a trace of pity appeared in the tomb master's eyes. He was very clear about Zhuowen's injuries. Zhuowen had sacrificed his life to use the 6th and 7th sword of the blood-splashing 5-step. He should have been dead, and the laws of heaven and earth did not allow him to live. If it wasn't for Taiqing forcefully retaining Zhuowen's vitality in his body with his own strength, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to live until now. As for saving Zhuowen, who should have been dead, it was a bit far-fetched. It was already a heaven-defying act, and it was also very difficult to succeed. Otherwise, Taiqing would have already healed Zhuowen's injuries. I hope this little fellow doesn't hold a grudge against Taiqing. In fact, Taiqing has already made enough compensation for this little fellow. Paramount Soul. Chapter 1899. Tracking it took Zhuowen 3 months to completely memorize the 5 divine abilities in his mind. Moreover, this was under the condition that he had the support of 4 levels of Tao intent. It was clear just how obscure and profound void heaven-grade divine abilities were. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that after comprehending the 4th level Tao insight, both his comprehension ability and mental state were much better than before. Let's try cultivating the Tao of Destruction sword art first. Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, waved his right hand and the Tao of Destruction sword art appeared in his hand. Then, he began to comprehend the divine powers silently. The Tao of Destruction sword art had a total of 9 moves. They were piercing thistles and thorns, first appearance of sword light, sun in the sky, dark moon comes sometimes, sun and moon come together, sky vault Tao territory, sword traveling in the great void, sword dragon slashing the sky, and creation of heaven and earth. The Tao of Destruction sword art was a void sky grade offensive divine powers. Its offensive power was absolutely superior to most divine powers. Moreover, this sword art had a total of 9 moves. Each move was more terrifying than the last. It was enough to cultivate to the virtual sky world without any worries. Although Zhuowen wanted to cultivate the celestial star meditation diagram as soon as possible, he knew that the tempering of the soul was not something that could be done overnight. It would take at least a year or even several years, and he only had 3 months, so he naturally did not plan to temper his soul. After all, the strength of the soul needed to be accumulated. However, The Tao of Destruction sword art only needed to be proficient in its technique. Even after his rebirth, he could quickly master the sword art, but he would have to cultivate and accumulate his soul again. Therefore, tempering his soul now would not be worth the loss. Sword in the Heart. The first page of the Tao of Destruction sword art was an introduction to this sword art. Zhuowen only skimmed through it casually before he began to comprehend the first move, piercing thistles and thorns. As he continued to comprehend, Zhuowen discovered that the Tao of Destruction sword art was not particularly difficult for him. He completely comprehended the first move, piercing thistles and thorns, in a month. When it was close to the third month, he actually completely comprehended the second move, first appearance of sword light. Avoid heaven-grade divine ability should be very difficult to comprehend, but why do I feel like I'm simplifying it when I comprehend it? Zhuowen frowned. In less than 3 months, Zhuowen had comprehended the first move of the Destruction Sword principle, piercing thistles, and the second move, first appearance of sword light. This speed was too fast for Zhuowen. Of course, he did not think that the Destruction Tao sword technique was simple. On the contrary, when he looked at the first 2 moves again, he could still sense the complicated and obscure feeling from the techniques of the 2 moves. However, when he began to comprehend it, he did not have such a complicated feeling. It was as if the Destruction Sword principle had been simplified during his comprehension. It's probably because of my mental state and 4th level Tao insight that my comprehension ability was affected, and that's why I was able to comprehend the Tao Destruction Sword technique so quickly. Although Zhuowen did not know why he was able to comprehend the Destruction Tao Destruction Sword technique so quickly, he knew that it must have something to do with the improvement of his mental state and the Tao insight he had comprehended. His mental state and Tao insight might have gradually improved Zhuowen's comprehension ability. Zhuowen wanted to continue comprehending the third move, but he realized that he did not have enough time. He also realized that the third move of the Destruction Tao Destruction Sword technique, Sun at Noon, was even more complicated. Even if his comprehension ability had increased greatly, the remaining time was not enough for him to comprehend the third style, Rising Sun at High Noon. How many days do I have left? Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and noticed that the surface of the back of his hand had turned dark. The dark color was like many spots that covered his entire body. These dark spots were surrounded by an extremely dense death qi. Then let's leave this place. It's time to absorb the Tao Insight Crystal. Zhuowen slowly stood up and walked toward the staircase. At the entrance of the 4th floor, the Tomb Master opened his eyes and looked at Zhuowen. He nodded slightly and did not say anything. Zhuowen cupped his fists at the Tomb Master and walked up the staircase to the 3rd floor. Just as he descended to the 3rd level, Zhuowen discovered that Lian Meng's pretty eyes were wide open at the entrance. She was sizing up Zhuowen from head to toe, while her small cherry lips were pouting like a proud kitten. Junior brother Zhuo, did Master give you the gold-grade Taiching Immortal token? How could Master be so biased? He only gave me the silver-grade Taiching Immortal token, but you gave me the gold-grade Taiching Immortal token the moment you arrived, Lian Meng said with dissatisfaction. Zhuowen smiled faintly and took out the gold-grade Taiching Immortal token. He handed it to Lian Meng and said, Senior Apprentice Sister, Junior Apprentice Brother will not be using this item in the future. Just treat it as a gift for Senior Apprentice Sister. After handing over the gold-grade Taiching Immortal token, Zhuowen smiled and left the 3rd floor. Lian Meng was stunned. She originally planned to question Zhuowen and then condemn her master for being biased. Who would have thought that Zhuowen would directly take out the gold-grade Taiching Immortal token and give it to her? For a moment she was still in a daze. When she came back to her senses, Zhuowen had already left the 3rd floor. Hey! Junior brother Zhuo, stop right there. I didn't say I wanted your Taiching Immortal token. Lian Meng hurriedly chased after him. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was too fast and had already left the range of the scripture depository. Moreover, Zhuowen deliberately avoided Lianmeng, so the moment he left the scripture depository, he hid his figure and quietly left. However, Zhuowen did not expect that the moment he left, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, who had been waiting outside for a long time, had already locked onto his figure. Zhuowen slowly shuttled through the clouds, silently looking at the great rivers and mountains under the clouds. The Taiqing immortal realm was indeed extremely beautiful. The mountains and rivers inside were spectacular and majestic. No matter where it was, it could be called a great wonder. But soon, Zhuowen stopped. His gaze fell on the front, and his brows furrowed slightly. In front of him, there were two young men. Perhaps they noticed that Zhuowen had discovered them, but the two young men both showed a malicious smile. "You too, why are you blocking my way?" Zhuowen said lightly. These two people were naturally Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, who quietly followed behind Zhuowen. It was not until they came to this uninhabited place that the two slowly appeared in front of Zhuowen. "What's the matter? You're Zhuowen, right? I heard you call the two of us flies before, right? I think you should apologize for your mouth." Yang Tong sneered at the corner of his mouth. Zhuowen stared faintly at Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, whose faces were full of malicious intentions, with a sarcastic smile on the corner of his mouth, and said, "Apologize? Why should I apologize? Was what I said before wrong? The two of you are really sticking to me like flies, aren't you?" Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's faces were slightly stagnant, and then their faces turned red with rage. Zhuowen's words completely angered them. "Zhuowen, if you had apologized and begged for mercy, we would have just taught you a lesson. Unfortunately, you're too arrogant. I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget. Don't blame us for being ruthless if you end up with a broken arm or a broken leg." Yang Tong's eyes were full of ferocity, but before he finished speaking, a broken arm flew past his eyes and then fell to the ground. Yang Tong was taken aback, and then he felt a pain in his right arm. He subconsciously looked at his right arm and found that it was empty. He immediately knew that the broken arm was his. At this moment, Zhuowen was standing not far behind Yang Tong. His right hand formed a sword finger, and milky white sword light gushed out from his fingertips. It was he who quickly cut off Yang Tong's right arm the moment he spoke. "I don't want to listen to your nonsense, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. If you are wise, retreat now. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you before," Zhuowen said coldly. Yang Tong and Bai Shuang were not stronger than Yang Yi. On the contrary, one of them was only a mid-stage heavenly god. Not to mention that Zhuowen had comprehended the void heaven-grade divine ability, the Tao-destroying sword art. Even without the Tao-destroying sword art, Zhuowen was not afraid of these two. "How dare you!" Yang Tong's eyes widened, and he immediately urged his star divine force to stop the blood from flowing out of his severed right arm. Then, he took out a 2-foot 8-inch small sword from his sleeve. "How dare you sneak attack me? Today I will completely destroy you. Even if you are a disciple of the Grand Pure One, you can't save you." Yang Tong was on the verge of rage. He did not consider the fact that Zhuowen had cut off his right arm so easily. Now, he only wanted to kill Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the early stage of the heavenly god realm. Yang Tong only thought that he had been careless, allowing Zhuowen to take advantage of him. He did not think that Zhuowen had the strength to confront him head-on. However, Bai Shuang was much more rational than Yang Tong. She took a few steps back and transmitted her voice to Yang Tong. "Brother Yang, this Zhuowen is not simple. We'd better not provoke him. Let's retreat." Unfortunately, Yang Tong did not pay attention to Bai Shuang's reminder at all. He stepped on the ground with his right foot and rushed toward Zhuowen like a stream of light. At the same time, Yang Tong held the small sword in his left hand and gently slashed from top to bottom. Suddenly, a wisp of aurora-like sword chi swept across the air. Its speed was extremely fast. Aurora's sword art. Yang Tong roared with red eyes. Zhuowen's eyes were dignified. He could see at a glance that the small sword in Yang Tong's hand was not simple. It was likely to be a complete heavenly god tool. Generally speaking, there were very few heavenly god tools in the early stage heavenly god tool. Only when they reached the middle stage heavenly god tool, or even the late stage heavenly god tool, would they have the ability to customize their own heavenly god tool. Zhuowen originally planned to refine the blood splashing 5 steps into his own heavenly god tool, but that was to wait until he completely possessed the young body. Now, he did not have a heavenly god tool at all. Both Yang Tong and Bai Shuang should have a heavenly god tool. Zhuowen was actually at an innate disadvantage facing these two people. Seeing Yang Tong taking out a heavenly god tool to attack Zhuowen, Bai Shuang hesitated for a moment and also took out a heavenly god tool level axe. She joined forces with Yang Tong to attack Zhuowen. For a time, the sky was filled with axe shadows. Now he and Yang Tong were grasshoppers on the same line. Whether he took action or not, once Zhuowen died, he would be regarded as an accomplice. So he simply took action to kill Zhuowen. Chapter 1900. Blood-killing command. Staring at the axe shadow and sword chi, Zhuowen did not dare to be negligent. He stepped back with his right foot, and then invisible ripples spread out from the soles of his feet. Whoosh! Zhuowen did not retreat but moved forward. The milky white light on his right hand's finger became more and more blazing. Then, Zhuowen's right hand moved forward, using his finger instead of the divine sword to perform the first move of the Tao-destroying sword technique, sword-piercing thorns. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, invisible sword shadows swept out from Zhuowen's finger. These sword shadows were like swimming fish, transforming into sharp thorns in front of Zhuowen. These thorns were constantly spiraling, as if there were countless spaces inside. They instantly enveloped the axe shadow and sword chi completely. Bang! 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 Soon after, Zhuowen discovered with astonishment that the might of the sword-piercing thistles was beyond his imagination. The sword chi and the axe silhouette from the heavenly divine artifact were actually completely distorted and annihilated by the thistles. What kind of divine ability is this? Looking at the sword chi and axe shadow that were annihilated in an instant, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's faces changed slightly. However, after the terrifying thorns annihilated the axe shadow and sword chi, they continued to rotate and grow toward the two. Damn it! Explosion sword technique, explode. Sky-raising axe shadow. The sword-piercing thorns was too powerful, forcing Yang Tong and Bai Shuang to use all their strength. Both of them used their strongest divine abilities. Boom! Yang Tong's explosion sword technique was extremely powerful. He casually swung his sword, and the sword chi that he swung out was like a terrifying bomb, constantly exploding. Wherever the sword chi passed, there was almost no intact space. Naturally, the oncoming thorns disappeared along with it. Bai Shuang leaped up, raised the giant axe above her head with both hands, and slammed it on the ground. Then, she smashed the giant axe hard on the thorns. Above the giant axe, countless energy converged into a huge axe shadow. The axe shadow was extremely huge. Its shape was like a mountain that penetrated the sky. The moment it smashed down, it seemed that the whole sky was collapsing, annihilating a large area of thorns. The two of them worked well together, wiping out all the thorns in the surroundings. Just as the two of them were about to continue their search for Zhuowen, a figure swiftly flew over and appeared above them. Zhuowen pointed out with his sword finger once again and executed the sword-piercing thistles. The swift and fierce sword chi transformed into dense and enormous thistles. At the same time, he silently fused the energy of his first-level Tao insight into the thistles, causing their might to increase by more than 2 times. You want to use the same move again? What a joke! This trick won't work on us. Yang Tong sneered and nodded to Bai Shuang. Once again, he made the same move as before, intending to meet the thorny sword. But soon, the two felt that something was wrong. When the sword thorns just crushed down, Yang Tong's blasting sword technique and Bai Shuang's heaven-raising axe shadow were suddenly crushed. They couldn't hold on for a long time. The two spat out blood and flew out. The moment the two flew back, Zhuowen stomped his right foot, turned into a shadow, and swept above the two. The sword fingers of his right hand pointed twice in succession, and immediately, two sharp sword chi swept towards Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. Puchi. These two sword chi, Zhuowen deliberately deviated and did not sweep towards the two's vital parts. Instead, they passed through their dantian. Two flowers of blood spurted out from the two's dantian. Then, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang both fell from the clouds into a valley. Zhuowen slowly floated above the valley. He looked down coldly at Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, who were lying in the valley, and said, "I have no enmity with the two of you. At most, it's just a quarrel. You want to join forces to kill me? Isn't that too much?" Yang Tong and Bai Shuang struggled to get up and covered their dantian. Their faces were ugly. They knew that Zhuowen deliberately pierced their dantian with the two sword chi. Now, they could clearly feel that there were two terrifying sword chis lingering in their dantian. These two sword chis were lingering in their dantian and were preventing their star energy from fusing with their divine soul to form star god power. They could clearly feel a sense of powerlessness. "You still haven't taken out the sword chi in our dantian? Do you want to destroy our foundation?" Yang Tong shouted angrily with an ugly face. Although the dantian of a cultivator was no longer as fragile as before after being promoted to the heavenly god realm, the dantian still played the role of the energy center in the cultivator's body. It was just that the dantian was no longer a place to hold energy, but an important place to transport energy. The most important thing for a heavenly god was to refine the star force of the planet. It was impossible for the dantian to hold a huge planet, but the dantian of a heavenly god could establish a special connection with the planet. It was like a transit station, absorbing the star force of the planet and transporting it to the divine soul to combine with the divine soul to form star god power. Once the dantian of a heavenly god was destroyed, although it was not life-threatening, it would cut off the star force transmitted from the planet. As a result, the star god power in the heavenly god's body would lose its source, resulting in a sense of powerlessness. Moreover, when the dantian was destroyed, it could be repaired with the heavenly god power, but the time and price required were extremely huge. This price was not something an ordinary heavenly god could bear. "Brother Zhuo, we were blinded by greed and offended you. I hope that on account of the fact that we are disciples of Nine Firmaments Palace, you will let us off. How about we let bygones be bygones?" Bai Shuang hastily said. Zhuowen looked down at Yang Tong and Bai Shuang and pointed his sword finger. Immediately, Bai Shuang and Yang Tong showed a painful expression. Immediately, the two of them clearly felt the sword chi in their dantian explode. The energy produced by the explosion completely tore their dantian apart. However, Zhuowen controlled his strength and only tore their dantian apart. It did not cause too much damage to their internal organs. Although the two of them showed murderous intent towards Zhuowen, Zhuowen had just arrived in the Taiching wonderland. He did not want to cause too much trouble. Destroying their dantian was just a warning to them. After all, when the dantian of a heavenly god was destroyed, it could still be repaired, but the price was quite high. As long as they were alive, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's cultivation would naturally be restored. This is a small lesson for you. I hope that next time you can open your eyes and not bite anyone you see. After saying that, Zhuowen did not bother to pay attention to Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. He stomped his right foot and left the valley. "That bastard, how dare he destroy my dantian? That damn bastard!" Yang Tong hammered the ground with his right hand, his eyes full of resentment. Bai Shuang smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Yang, forget it. It's good that Zhuowen let us live. After we return to the ninth heaven palace, we can still restore our Dantian in 100 years. Before Bai Shuang finished speaking, she was interrupted by Yang Tong. He took out a blood-red token and said coldly, "I won't let that bastard off so easily." "Blood-killing token? Brother Yang, how do you have such a thing?" Bai Shuang's pupils shrank as she said in disbelief. The blood-killing token was a killing token issued by the Blood Temple in the Taiching Wonderland. The Blood Temple's reputation in the Taiching Wonderland was not very good, because the Divine Blood Hall was a power that specialized in nurturing assassins. Moreover, it carried out the naked law of the jungle. Only the strong could live in the Divine Blood Hall, and the weak had to die. The weak couldn't survive in the Divine Blood Hall. Therefore, the assassins who came out of the Blood Temple were extremely bloodthirsty and terrifying. In the Taiching Wonderland, few cultivators would provoke the assassins of the Blood Temple. Moreover, the Blood Temple's ranking in the Taiching Wonderland was not low. It could be ranked in the top 20. The blood-killing token was a marketing method of the Blood Temple. Those who could get the blood-killing token had to spend a lot of money to buy it from the Blood Temple. Moreover, any cultivator who had the blood-killing token could write the name of the person they wanted to kill on the token with their blood essence. The name on the blood kill token would be endlessly pursued by the assassins of the Blood God Temple until that person died. Only then would the assassins stop beheading them. Bai Shuang said hesitantly, "Brother Yang, isn't it too much to use the blood-killing token to chase Shuwen? After all, we don't have a death feud with him." Yang Tong snorted coldly and said, "Destroying my Dantian is like killing me. It's not too much to use the blood-killing token." With that, Yang Tong bit his thumb and then slowly wrote Zhuo Wen's name on the surface of the blood-killing token. Hua! As soon as Zhuo Wen's name was written, the blood-killing token emitted an extremely blazing bloody light. The two words Zhuo Wen written with Yang Tong's blood essence slowly sank into the blood-killing token. The bloody light kept squirming and finally formed the phantom of a blood-robed man. The blood-robed man glanced at Yang Tong and said, "Are you sure you want to use the blood-killing token? And the person you want to kill is this person?" Yang Tong said hatefully, "I'm sure. Help me kill this person." The blood-robed man nodded and immediately collapsed into countless bloody lights. The blood-killing token suddenly broke through the air, rushed out of the valley, and rushed in the direction of Zhuo Wen's departure. Its speed was extremely fast. Zhuo Wen slowly flew above the clouds. He was ready to return to the Morality Palace. The Scriptures Pavilion was actually some distance away from the Morality Palace. In addition, Zhuo Wen was not in a hurry to go back, so his speed was not very fast. After all, there were still a few days before his vitality was cut off. He happened to want to use this time to take a good look at the Taiching Wonderland. Whoosh! Suddenly, a whistling sound came. Zhuo Wen looked back and found that a bloody light quickly swept over his head. Zhuo Wen frowned. The sword finger of his right hand suddenly pointed upwards. Then, a ray of terrifying sword chi burst out and heavily blasted into the bloody light. At this moment, Zhuo Wen also found that hidden in the bloody light was a bloody token. The front of the token was engraved with the words Zhuo Wen, and the back was engraved with the word kill. Bang! As soon as the sword chi touched the blood-killing token, the token collapsed directly. Then, countless bloody lines dissipated. Among the countless bloody lines, a very bright bloody line suddenly drilled into Zhuo Wen's body. Chapter 1901. Killer Zhuo Wen's brows slowly furrowed. After the blood threads entered his body, the other blood threads that had spread out completely dissipated and disappeared. His body actually began to glow with a rather blazing bloody light. The blood light filled Zhuo Wen's body. If it was in the night, Zhuo Wen's whole body would burst out with blood light, just like a blood man. After Zhuo Wen carefully looked at his whole body several times with divine sense, he couldn't detect the specific location of the bloodline that entered his body. What the hell is that? Zhuo Wen tried to cover up the blood light on his body, but found that it was useless. At this moment, Zhuowen faintly felt an ominous feeling. He was sure that this blood light was by no means a good thing, and it must have been imposed on him by someone else. Zhuowen entered the Taiqing immortal realm for less than half a year, and there were only a few people he knew. The only ones who had a grudge with him were Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, whose dantian was destroyed by him just now. I have already let you live, but since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He stomped his right foot and returned. The bloodlight just now definitely had an inseparable relationship with Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. After a while, Zhuowen swept over the previous valley, but Yang Tong and Bai Shuang were no longer in the valley. You can't escape. Zhuowen pointed his right sword finger, and suddenly a sword qi swept out. This sword qi swept a circle in front, and then rushed in a direction. In Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's dantian, there was still the aura of Zhuowen's sword qi. Zhuowen could follow the aura of this sword qi to track the fleeing Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. Hundreds of miles outside the valley, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang kept flying, but the speed of the two was not fast. After all, their dantian was broken, and star power could not fully supply their whole body. Now they could barely maintain the flying state. Whoosh! Suddenly, a whistling sound came. Immediately, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang, who were flying slowly, became alert. They turned around and immediately saw Zhuowen coming from behind with a murderous aura. Not good, this guy has caught up. How did he determine our position? Yang Tong's face changed slightly and he panicked. Bai Shuang was no better. The two of them were not a match for Zhuowen even when they were at their peak. Now that their dantians had been destroyed, their strength had been greatly reduced. If Zhuowen wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. Zhuowen's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he was not far from Yang Tong and Bai Shuang. Just as he was about to start, an ominous feeling suddenly burst out in his mind. Whoosh! Just as this ominous feeling arose, a sharp gust of wind came from behind Zhuowen. Then, in the space not far from Zhuowen's head, a bloody hand quickly stretched out. Zhang Xian held a blood-red dagger in his hand. The tip of the blood-red dagger was aimed directly at the back of Zhuowen's head. His attack was decisive and unexpected. Zhuowen reacted quickly. The moment the bloody hand stretched out, he realized that something was wrong. He kicked his right foot and quickly turned sideways. However, the bloody hand was too close to him. Even if Zhuowen's reaction was fast, he was still caught by the bloody hand. Poochie! The dagger swept across the side of Zhuowen's face. A very deep wound directly appeared on Zhuowen's face. Bright blood gushed out and dyed the side of Zhuowen's face red, adding a touch of ferociousness to Zhuowen. Huh! A soft voice came from behind Zhuowen, as if surprised by Zhuowen's quick reaction speed. Zhuowen took advantage of this moment and grabbed the bloody hand, holding the bloody dagger with his left hand. Immediately, he pointed the sword finger of his right hand backward and used the sword thrusting thorns. Countless sharp sword shadows shot out, turning into terrifying thorny shadows. The thorns were densely packed, like Boston ivy, turning into a spiral that kept spinning, entangling the owner of the bloody hand behind him in an instant. As for Zhuowen, he bluntly used the sword fingers of his left hand to shoot out a foot-long sword light, which violently chopped off the bloody hand he was holding. At the same time, Zhuowen turned around abruptly, staring coldly at the figure behind him who was bound by the thorns formed by the sword shadows. The figure was a man in a blood-red robe. He was expressionless. Even if the bloody hand was cut off by him, his face was still expressionless, as if he felt no pain at all. The blood-red robed man's cultivation was around the intermediate divine realm, but the sense of danger he gave Zhuowen was even stronger than that of Yang Tong, who was in the advanced divine realm. Moreover, the blood-red robed man's concealment technique was extremely terrifying. Previously, when he was hidden in space, Zhuowen did not notice him at all. It was not until the moment the blood-red robed man swept out that Zhuowen finally found the traces of the blood-red robed man. If it were not for Zhuowen's decisiveness and quick reaction, the blood-red-robed man might have succeeded and killed him. The blood slayers must die. The blood-red-robed man who was entangled by countless thorns looked indifferent. His eyes burst with bloody light, and suddenly, his body swelled and exploded. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He did not expect the blood-red-robed man to choose to self-destruct so decisively. The terrifying explosion energy instantly enveloped Zhuowen. At this moment, the heaven-devouring eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows cracked open. A black vortex swept out from the heaven-devouring eye and surrounded Zhuowen. The moment the blood-red-robed man self-destructed, 9 bloody vortexes appeared in the outer space of the explosion. 9 blood-red-robed men appeared in the 9 bloody vortexes. The blood slayers are not simple. He's not dead yet. Let's kill him together. The leading blood-red-robed man said coldly. Then, he led the other 8 blood-red-robed men, turned into 9 rays of bloody light and disappeared into the explosion. Not far away, Yang Tong and Bai Shuang saw this scene and sighed lightly. The 9 blood-red-robed men were not simple. The leading blood-red-robed man's cultivation was at the advanced divine realm, while the rest were all at the intermediate divine realm. It should be known that the assassins of the Blood Shrine were extremely terrifying. Their assassination techniques were very powerful and could often kill divine realm experts of the same level. Yang Tong did not dare to provoke the intermediate divine realm blood-red-robed men because they were a group of murderous maniacs who would do anything to kill. This Zhuowen is dead for sure. A late-stage heavenly god and 8 mid-stage heavenly god assassins from the Divine Blood Temple working together is enough to kill any late-stage heavenly god. Even a peak heavenly god could be seriously injured, Yang Tong sneered. At this moment, in the boundless explosion, endless waves of fire spread out. Zhuowen was in the midst of the waves of fire. His body was surrounded by the devouring power of the heaven-devouring eye, constantly devouring the terrifying power of the waves of fire around him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 9 sounds of breaking through the air came from not far away. Then, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. Outside the waves of fire, 9 blood-red-robed men had turned into 9 directions and rushed towards Zhuowen, who was at the core of the explosion. At this moment, Zhuowen was suppressing a ball of fire in his heart. He did not know this group of blood-red-robed men at all, but they tried to kill him as soon as they arrived. Moreover, there was no end to it. This made Zhuowen angry. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with killing intent. An extremely strong invisible ripple burst out from his body. Like a stone falling into water, the ring-shaped ripple filled the entire explosion and caused the explosion to stop. This is the power of Tao intent? And its 3rd level Tao intent. Where did this kid come from? The 9 blood-red-robed men paused. The leader revealed a trace of shock. To be able to comprehend 3rd level Tao intent, he was a monstrous existence in the Tai-Ching immortal realm. Moreover, the young man before them seemed to be extremely young. He was probably a disciple that was focused on nurturing in a certain hall. My lord. One of the people behind the leader spoke with slight hesitation. Kill. We must kill the members of the Blood Shrine. This is the rule of my Blood Shrine. We can't break the precedent. This kid is only an early-stage heavenly god. What can the power behind him do to my Blood Shrine if we kill him? After the leader finished speaking coldly, he stomped his right foot. He disregarded the waves of fire in the surroundings as nothing and continued to flash towards Zhuowen. As for the 8 blood-red-robed men behind him, they naturally obeyed the leader's orders. At this moment, Zhuowen moved as well. He stepped on the waves of fire. Waves of invisible ripples appeared beneath his feet, but his speed seemed to be nothing in the waves of fire. Sword pierces brambles. Zhuowen pointed with his right finger. The sword light at the tip of his finger was like a real divine sword as it erupted with dense sword shadows and brambles. The sword shadows and brambles were far more terrifying than before. In a single moment they enveloped the entire area of the explosion. The 9 blood-red robed men were caught off guard. They were immediately bound by the sword shadows and brambles. The leader was much more powerful. The moment he was bound by the sword shadows and brambles, he drew his blood-red daggers with both hands. He spun around at the waist, and the daggers in his hands turned into rings of blood-red light as he spun. In an instant, the sword shadow thistles were being destroyed layer by the leader. However, there were many sword shadow thistles, and they were constantly growing in a spiral shape. Even if the leader destroyed one layer, there would still be another layer. The other 8 blood-red robed men were unable to move at all. They were bound by the sword shadows, and could only barely hold on. Zhuowen strolled leisurely. He arrived before a blood-red robed man, and a milky white streak of light shot out from the tip of his right hand. He stabbed the man between the eyebrows in a single moment and destroyed his soul. Zhuowen knew very well that once these blood-red robed men realized that they could not escape, they would definitely self-destruct like the first blood-red robed man he met the first time. Therefore, Zhuowen's movements were very fast. He attacked the moment the sword shadows and brambles bound the blood-red robed men. With the help of the power of the 3rd level Tao Will, Zhuowen speed soared to the extreme. He pointed with his right hand and instantly killed 7 blood-red robed men. The 8th blood-red robed man realized that something was wrong and immediately planned to self-destruct. Unfortunately, the heaven-devouring eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows immediately opened. A devouring power gushed out. The moment the blood-red robed man was about to self-destruct, he was completely devoured by the heaven-devouring eye. Bang bang bang. Chapter 1902. Misunderstanding. This is no ordinary divine ability, nor is it a true divine ability. Could it be a void sky divine ability? The blood-robed leader stared at Zhuowen with an unsightly expression. He had seen both divine abilities and true divine abilities before. However, the aura of Zhuowen's Tao Destruction Sword art was so terrifying that it made his heart palpitate. Perhaps only a void heaven-grade divine ability could give him such a feeling. Zhuowen couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the blood-robed leader. He stomped his right foot, and a circular ripple spread out under his feet. It was as if he was stepping on water, forming countless ripples. Seeing Zhuowen rushing over, the leader of the blood-robed men had a sinister look in his eyes. He crossed his arms and stabbed the dagger in his hand into his armpits, cutting off both of his arms. Bang bang bang! The blood-robed leader cut off his own arms. His eyes flashed with determination as he chanted a complicated chant. His chopped arms instantly exploded into clouds of blood mist. The blood mist wriggled and condensed into a 10-meter-long blood-red saber. The saber was covered in blood-red skulls. These skulls belong to the heavenly gods I've assassinated. Today, I'll show you the power of this saber of 10,000 skulls. The blood-robed leader's lips curled into a sinister smile. He swept his right foot up and grabbed the hilt of the saber of 10,000 skulls. The saber of 10,000 skulls whistled through the air. Wherever it passed, the wind howled and space trembled. This was his last desperate attack. If he couldn't kill Zhuowen with this attack, the leader would immediately detonate himself and use the energy of the explosion to kill Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He first glanced at the blood-robed leader and saw the death wish in the latter's eyes. He knew that if the saber of 10,000 skulls couldn't kill him, the blood-robed leader would immediately detonate himself. I can't let him detonate himself. Zhuowen made up his mind. He pointed with his right hand and used the sword thrust of thorns again. He tried to bind the saber of 10,000 skulls in a spiral manner. Unfortunately, the sword thrust of thorns had no effect on the saber of 10,000 skulls. The saber of 10,000 skulls annihilated all the thorns. Seeing the saber of 10,000 skulls unstoppable, the blood-robed leader let out a sigh of relief. He knew that the sword thrust of 10,000 skulls was Zhuowen's 10,000 skulls. 1,000 skulls. And the sword of 10,000 skulls. Zhuowen on 1,000 skulls. 1,000 skulls, blood skulls, blood skulls, even translation, 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 translation. The blood-robed leader noticed Zhuowen's actions and sneered. He kicked the ground with his right foot and landed on the saber of 10,000 skulls. He said coldly, "Do you think I don't know your little trick?" However, as soon as the blood-robed leader finished speaking, Zhuowen revealed a mocking smile. Zhuowen said flatly, "You really don't know my little trick. Otherwise, you wouldn't have walked right into my trap." After he finished speaking, Zhuowen slowly drew a line with his right finger, and the sword light at the tip of his finger instantly grew several feet long. The second move of destruction swordsmanship, the beginning of sword radiance. The moment Zhuowen drew with his fingertip, the sword radiance that grew several feet long condensed into a tiny light spot. It left Zhuowen's fingertip and shot directly between the eyebrows of the blood-robed leader. Puff! The blood-robed leader didn't even have time to react before a bloody hole appeared between his eyebrows. Then, his vitality was completely cut off, his soul shattered, and the saber of 10,000 skulls collapsed. After the sword radiance passed through the blood-robed leader, it began to expand constantly, bursting out a blazing white light. The explosion formed by the blood-robed leader's self-destruction was directly covered by this white light and then annihilated. "Brother Yang, look, the battle above seems to have changed. What is this white light? The energy contained in it is terrifying." Not far from the battlefield, Bai Shuang suddenly pointed to the white light that erupted from the explosion above. Yang Tong shook his head and said, "I'm not sure. It should be a powerful move used by the assassin of the Blood Divine Temple. Zhuowen is dead for sure. Let's go quickly. Senior Sister Jing Hai should be here soon. If she knows that we are involved with the assassin of the Blood Divine Temple, I'm afraid we will be scolded." Bai Shuang nodded. Immediately, the two of them supported each other in the air and flew slowly into the distance. However, the two of them didn't fly for long before the explosion behind them was completely submerged by the white light. Then, a figure gradually walked out of the white light. The two of them felt something and turned around to look. Both of them trembled and their eyes bulged as they looked at the figure behind them incredulously. "It's Zhuowen. Did this guy kill the 9 assassins of the Blood Divine Temple? Let's go." Yang Tong couldn't help but yell and immediately fled in a hurry. Needless to say, Bai Shuang naturally ran away the moment she saw Zhuowen. Unfortunately, the speed of the two, in the eyes of Zhuowen, was simply the speed of a turtle. After a while, Zhuowen caught up with them and slapped them to the ground again. "Who was the assassin who chased me just now?" Zhuowen looked at Yang Tong coldly. Yang Tong trembled and said honestly, "They are assassins of the Blood Divine Temple. They chased you, but it has nothing to do with us. Our Dantian was destroyed by you. What else do you want?" Zhuowen smiled coldly. His right-hand sword finger derived a white sword light and said, "Do you still want to lie? Since you don't want to say it, it doesn't matter. After I kill you, I will ask someone else." "Don't kill me. This has nothing to do with me. It was Yang Tong who used the blood-killing token. I didn't agree with it before. Brother Zhuo, if you have something to say, let's talk." Seeing Zhuowen's murderous look, Bai Shuang immediately betrayed Yang Tong. She didn't want to die here with Yang Tong. Bai Shuang Yang Tong's face changed greatly. When he was about to talk back, Zhuowen slapped him, making his mouth swollen. He said coldly, "If you talk nonsense again, I will kill you directly." Yang Tong immediately covered his mouth and didn't dare to talk nonsense. "What is the blood-killing token?" Zhuowen realized that the token that swept into his body was probably the blood-killing token that Bai Shuang spoke of. Seeing Zhuowen ask, Bai Shuang immediately began to talk about the effects and origins of the blood-killing token. After listening, Zhuowen's face gradually became gloomy. He didn't expect that the blood-killing token was a kind of killing token issued by the Blood Divine Temple. Once the name of the person being chased was engraved in the blood-killing token, the Blood Divine Temple would spare no effort to kill him. In other words, even though Zhuowen had killed 10 blood-robed people, the Blood Divine Temple still wouldn't give up until Zhuowen killed him. After that, they would send more assassins to chase after Zhuowen. After the blood-killing token was planted in his body, he would face the endless pursuit of the Blood Divine Temple. Brother Zhuo Yangtong's face changed slightly. Just as he was about to say something, Zhuowen's right sword finger pierced into Yangtong's glabella, directly destroying Yangtong's soul and cutting off his vitality. Looking at the completely fallen Yangtong, Bai Shuang's eyes were full of fear. He stared at Zhuowen in front of him in fear, his heart thumping wildly. At the same time, he regretted that he had joined forces with Yang Tong to deal with Zhuowen. How can this Zhuowen be so terrifying? If I had known, I wouldn't have gone against him. Bai Shuang secretly complained in his heart. Hand over everything you have. Zhuowen looked at Bai Shuang coldly. Bai Shuang trembled and didn't dare to neglect. He immediately handed over everything on his body, even his divine-level axe. After Zhuowen casually put away Bai Shuang's things, he leaned over and put away Yang Tong's spirit ring. Then, he casually checked Yang Tong's spirit ring and found a lot of divine stones inside. The role of divine stones was similar to that of immortal crystals. They were used for cultivation. However, immortal crystals were used for cultivation by celestial sage experts, while divine stones were used by divine transformation experts. However, Zhuowen wasn't interested in these divine stones. He knew very well that he didn't have much time left and he couldn't take these things out. Taking out Bai Shuang's divine sword, Zhuowen gently weighed it and nodded slightly. This divine sword was quite handy. The Destruction Dao sword art that he cultivated required a sword to unleash its true power. However, he had just comprehended it not long ago, so he did not have the time to forge his own divine sword before encountering such an incident. He could only use his sword fingers to replace the divine sword. Although Yang Tong's divine sword didn't fit Zhuowen, the divine sword was much better than the sword finger. At least, it could exert most of the power of the Destruction Dao sword art. Whoosh. After Zhuowen put away Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's things, a whistling sound suddenly came. Then, Zhuowen squinted his eyes and found that it wasn't the assassin of the Blood God Temple, but the gentlewoman of the Ninth Heaven Palace, Jing Hai, who he met in the Scripture Pavilion. Jing Hai landed not far from Zhuowen. She first glanced at Zhuowen and frowned slightly, but soon her face changed slightly when she found Yang Tong's body lying at Zhuowen's feet. Yang Tong? You killed Yang Tong? Jing Hai was stunned for a moment, and then she stared at Zhuowen with her beautiful eyes. Zhuowen casually played with the divine sword in his hand and said indifferently, "It wasn't my wish to kill him. He was just courting death. I, Zhuowen, am not someone who would stir up trouble. I believe that senior sister Jing Hai is a reasonable person." Bullsh *T. You killed a disciple of the Ninth Heaven Palace, and you want me to be reasonable? You are despicable and disgusting. Then, Jing Hai took a step and rushed toward Zhuowen. She didn't even listen to Zhuowen's explanation and attacked. Sword-piercing brambles. Zhuowen's face turned ugly. He had no choice but to use the sword-piercing brambles again. The divine sword blasted out, and the sword's shadows turned into brambles. They wriggled and moved toward Jing Hai from all directions. At the same time, Zhuowen took a step with his right foot and quickly retreated. Jing Hai was very strong. She should be a one-calamity real god, and she was even stronger than Lian Meng. She was probably a real god who had survived one lightning calamity. Zhuowen wasn't a match for such an existence, and he didn't want to fight her head-on. The corners of Jing Hai's mouth curled up into a cold smile. She twisted her wrist and a strange chill surged out from her palm. The surrounding thistles and thorns completely stopped and were even covered in frost. Break. Chapter 1903. Lian Meng was indignant. As he looked at Jing Hai that easily destroyed the thistles and thorns, Zhuowen's heart sank slightly. Jing Hai was truly too strong, whereas the gap between him and a true god was truly too great. He was probably not a match for Jing Hai at all. If Jing Hai really wanted to fight Zhuowen, then Zhuowen would probably only be able to utilize the strength of a 4th-level Dao insight. Bang! 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 Countless bits of ice fluttered out as Jing Hai stomped on the ground and swiftly flashed towards Zhuowen like a vigorous and furious dragon. An extremely terrifying pressure seemed as if the sky had collapsed as it firmly pressed onto Zhuowen on the spot. Sword light emergence. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he held tightly onto the divine sword with his right hand, and then he suddenly slashed forward. The sound of the blade tearing through space was like the sound of cloth being torn apart, and it slowly resounded out in the sky. At the instant the divine sword slashed to the end, a wisp of sword light that was condensed to the extreme shot out like a white marble, and it swiftly shot towards the space between Jing Hai's brows. Jing Hai's beautiful eyes squinted as she sensed that this wisp of sword light wasn't ordinary, so she formed a palm with her hand and suddenly slapped out, causing terrifying cold air to surge out explosively. Zhuowen even noticed that the cold air that Jing Hai blasted out with her palm actually contained an extremely strong aura of lightning. Moreover, this aura of lightning caused Zhuowen's hair to stand on end. Zhuowen knew that this aura of lightning ought to be the aura of the Heaven Dao that was bestowed upon Jing Hai by the lightning calamity after she overcame the lightning calamity. No wonder Master said all those years ago that the more calamities a true god overcomes, the more terrifying their strength would be. I'm afraid the main reason is the aura of the calamity. The stronger the aura of the calamity, the stronger the strength of the true god would be correspondingly strengthened. Zhuowen thought in his heart while the condensed sword light had already completely descended before Jing Hai, and it collided heavily with Jing Hai's palm. Cold air surged and instantly enveloped the sword light, and then it solidified into a translucent ice crystal. Moreover, strands of strange lightning flickered on the surface of the ice crystal. I thought your divine ability was very powerful, but it turns out that it's just a facade. Jing Hai's cherry lips sneered, but her smile quickly froze. The sword light that was frozen by the ice crystals suddenly exploded, and a huge milky white light enveloped Jing Hai. Senior sister Jing Hai. Bai Shuang's gaze changed and she couldn't help but exclaim. Ice soul freezing sky. Jing Hai's voice slowly came out from the white light. Then, the white light that exploded from the sword light froze into ice cubes with threatening cold air. In the blink of an eye, the space within 100 feet of the sword light turned into an ice wall filled with chilling air. Then, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the ice wall before it finally shattered into countless ice shards. Countless ice shards fluttered in the air as Jing Hai walked out. Her beautiful eyes were coldly staring at Zhuowen. At the same time, her heart was filled with shock. Zhuowen's strength had exceeded her expectations. Although he was only an early god, the strength he displayed was actually so great. It was no wonder that he could kill Yang Tong, who was a late god. Miss Jing Hai, you attacked me without distinguishing right from wrong. Aren't you being a little too unreasonable? Zhuowen said coldly. Unreasonable? You killed a disciple of my 9th heaven hall, Yang Tong, and you're saying that I'm unreasonable? You really have no sense of shame. I really don't understand why Venerable Taiqing would accept someone like you as a disciple. Jing Hai's face was filled with mockery. Afterwards, she stomped her foot and tried to rush towards Zhuowen again. However, a black and white pattern soon descended from the sky, blocking Jing Hai's path and stopping her. Jing Hai retreated several dozen feet and stared at the sky with furrowed brows. She said with a deep voice, Junior Sister Lianmeng, is that you? As soon as she said that, a pair of black and white fishes appeared in the sky. Afterwards, The fishes constantly revolved before finally transforming into a beautiful figure. This beautiful figure was overflowing with immortal qi, like an inviolable lotus flower. It was Lianmeng. Senior sister Jinghai, calm down. Junior brother Zhuowen is only an early god. He's not your opponent at all. You attacked him as soon as you came up. Do you really plan to kill him? Lianmeng slowly landed in front of Zhuowen and wrinkled her nose. Jinghai sneered, Junior sister Lianmeng, this Zhuowen killed Yang Tong. He dared to kill a disciple of my ninth heaven hall. Even if he's Venerable Taiching's disciple, he can't do as he pleases, right? Lianmeng's long, shapely eyebrows slightly furrowed. Soon after, she turned to look at Zhuowen behind her. However, she quickly noticed the strange bloody glow radiating from Zhuowen's body, causing her to involuntarily cry out in alarm, Junior brother Zhuo, you have been given a blood kill order? The moment Zhuozheng said this, Jinghai, who was smiling coldly, noticed the strange scarlet light coming from Zhuozheng's body. Her expression changed slightly. She naturally knew about the blood kill command. It was a command medallion issued by the Divine Blood Temple. It was a shameful thing that could only be obtained in secret. It seems that Zhuowen has done a lot of evil and provoked some kind of enemy. That's why he's been given a blood kill command. He deserves it, Jing Hai said eloquently. Lianmeng frowned and said, Junior brother Zhuo hasn't been in the Taiching immortal realm for long. How could he have provoked some kind of enemy? Senior sister Jinghai, don't slander others, okay? Zhuowen said indifferently, the blood kill command on me was given by Yang Tong. If you don't believe me, you can ask Bai Shuang. Jinghai's expression froze. She looked at Bai Shuang and saw the latter lowering her head without saying anything. She knew that Zhuowen was right. What she didn't understand was how Yang Tong could have such an evil thing like the blood slaughter token, and why would he use it on Zhuowen? Let me explain the cause and effect. Zhuowen came to Lianmeng's side and began to slowly tell her what had happened. Especially when Zhuowen said that after sparing Yang Tong and Bai Shuang's lives, Yang Tong still used the blood kill command on Zhuowen. Lianmeng's pretty face was full of anger. This Yang Tong is not human. Junior brother Zhuo has already let them go, but he still used such a vicious blood kill command on junior brother Zhuo. This Yang Tong deserves to die. Lianmeng waved her fist and said hatefully. Jing Hai's brows furrowed deeper and deeper. She knew very well that if Zhuowen's words were true, then Yang Tong deserved to die. After all, Yang Tong had used the blood kill command on Zhuowen, which was tantamount to creating a death feud with him. It would be strange if Zhuowen didn't kill him. You killed 10 divine blood temple assassins alone, and one of them was even a late heavenly god? Hearing that Zhuowen had actually killed an assassin of the divine blood temple, Jing Hai was quite surprised. However, when she thought of the strength that Zhuowen had displayed before, she quickly believed in Zhuowen's words. Lianmeng wasn't surprised because when the Sky Dao Lord introduced Zhuowen, she'd been told that Zhuowen had comprehended 4 Dao insight. In other words, if Zhuowen could display the power of Dao meanings, he could display 4 times his strength. This was an extremely terrifying increase. It wasn't strange that Zhuowen had defeated a late heavenly god assassin of the Divine Blood Temple. Senior sister Jinghai, shouldn't you apologize for what happened before? Lianmeng's beautiful eyes flickered. Jinghai shook her head and said, Yang Tong issued the blood kill command on Zhuowen, and Zhuowen also killed Yang Tong. The two don't owe each other anything. What happened just now was purely a misunderstanding. As for the apology, there's no need. After saying that, Jing Hai ordered Bai Shuang to put away Yang Tong's corpse and left. How did senior sister Jing Hai become like this? Seeing Jing Hai's actions, Lianmeng stomped her foot in annoyance. Her voice was filled with displeasure. Zhuowen shook his head and said, Senior sister Jing Hai is a disciple of the 9th Heaven Hall after all. Moreover, I killed Yang Tong, who belonged to the 9th Heaven Hall. It's already good that she didn't pursue the matter. It's impossible for her to apologize. Lian Meng nodded, but she still pouted. She seemed to be very unhappy. However, she seemed to have thought of something and looked at Zhuowen and said, "Junior brother Jinghai, were you injured in the battle with senior sister Jinghai?" Senior sister Jinghai is a true god who has survived a lightning calamity. She's stronger than me. Zhuowen waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. Shortly after, he said solemnly, "Senior sister Lian Meng, the blood kill command was placed on my body. It's better if you don't follow me. Otherwise, you'll be implicated." "That won't do. I'm your senior sister. How can I leave you alone?" "Don't worry, I'll protect you from now on." Lian Meng patted her chest and said. Zhuowen was somewhat speechless as he looked at this so-called senior sister who was much younger than him. He stretched out his head and patted Lian Meng's head, saying, "I say, senior sister, you're younger than me. It's really inappropriate for you to speak like an old man. You'd better stay where you are." Seeing Zhuowen's somewhat shameless behavior, Lian Meng's tender body trembled and became completely stiff. Her gaze was fixed on Zhuowen's body. Soon after, she hurriedly retreated dozens of steps. Her charming face was slightly red as she shouted at Zhuowen, "What, old man? Your cultivation is much lower than mine, and you're my junior brother in name. How is it inappropriate for me to protect you?" Zhuowen helplessly looked at this somewhat childish Lian Meng. He shook his head and said, "Senior sister, I just want to ask you, have you fought before?" Lian Meng's face turned red. She twisted her hands together and said somewhat unnaturally, "Of course I have. How could I not? Back then, I often sparred with senior sister Jinghai." "Then have you killed anyone before?" Zhuowen's gaze was sharp as he suddenly asked. Lian Meng's gaze turned sluggish. She touched her face with her right hand and said softly, "I think so. I don't think so." Seeming to have realized something, Lian Meng shouted at Zhuowen, "What does this have to do with me killing people before? I'm your senior sister. I have the right to protect you." Zhuowen looked at Lian Meng and sighed in his heart. Even without Lian Meng saying anything, he knew that Lian Meng's combat experience was pitifully little. Even when sparring with Jinghai, they should have stopped when appropriate. Once they encountered those bloodthirsty assassins of the Divine Blood Temple, Zhuowen was very clear that Lian Meng would be at a loss. At that time, she might not even be able to display the strength of a true god. So. Chapter 1904. Great Sanguine Killing Array. Bang! 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 Blood-colored stone pillars flew out from the blood-colored vortexes. The blood-red stone pillar flew out and immediately pierced into the depths of the ground, connecting the heavens and the earth. Corpses were embedded on the surface of the blood-colored stone pillars. The expressions of these corpses were filled with pain before they died, as if they had been tortured. There were a total of 99 blood-colored stone pillars arranged in a ring shape in the area of 10,000 miles around Zhuowen and Lian Meng. Moreover, after these 99 stone pillars were inserted into the ground, a strange blood-colored flame gushed out from the top of them. The blood-colored flames grew more and more terrifying. In an instant, the blood-colored light soared into the sky and blazed everywhere. "Junior brother, be careful." The instant the blood-colored flames arrived, Lian Meng's expression changed slightly. With a wave of her hand, she took out the black and white jade stone hanging in front of her chest. Then, she formed a seal with her hand and the black and white jade stone immediately blossomed with black and white colors. Whoosh! The black and white jade stone soared into the sky and turned into a pair of black and white fish. The head and tail of the fish were connected, and they spun unceasingly. They enveloped the sky above Zhuowen and Lian Meng, forming a rotating protective barrier. The protective barrier formed by the black and white fish was extremely tough. It actually blocked the terrifying blood-colored flames surging from the surroundings. This is the Great Sanguine Killing Array of the Divine Blood Temple. It's a great array specially used to assassinate true gods. Furthermore, the one controlling this Great Sanguine Killing Array is at least a one-disaster true god, Lian Meng's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of worry. Just as Lian Meng finished speaking, the blood-colored flames within the stone pillars suddenly became violent. They soared into the sky and scattered the clouds above the 9 heavens. The blood-colored flames crisscrossed in the sky and formed an incomparably huge blood-colored kill character. This extremely bright kill character alarmed many cultivators from the surrounding forces. Not far from this place, Jing Hai and Bai Shuang were flying silently. Suddenly, the soaring blood-colored flames attracted their attention. "It's the great sanguine killing array." Bai Shuang carried Yang Tong's body and turned to look at the huge kill character formed by the blood flames. She trembled and couldn't help but blurt out. Jing Hai frowned slightly. She knew that the Divine Blood Temple should have made a move against Zhuowen. However, she hadn't expected that the assassins of the Divine Blood Temple would set up the Great Blood Killing Array and muster such a large force. After all, the Great Sanguine Killing Formation was a killing formation used against true gods. With the help of such a terrifying killing formation, almost no true god could escape from the Great Sanguine Killing Formation. "Then Zhuowen and Lian Meng are finished," Bai Shuang muttered. Jing Hai clenched her fist. She didn't care about Zhuowen's life or death, but she had an extremely good relationship with Lian Meng. Moreover, they had been good friends for many years. She couldn't just sit by and watch. "Senior sister Jing Hai, you can't be thinking of helping them, right? Don't take the risk. You'll just be courting death if you go. This is the Great Sanguine Killing Formation of the Divine Blood Temple. It killed true God 2 disasters before." Bai Shuang could not help but say when she saw Jing Hai's hesitation. Jing Hai was silent for a moment and said, "Let's observe the situation first." Bai Shuang wanted to persuade her again, but Jing Hai glared at Bai Shuang. The latter immediately dared not speak again. At the same time, the Great Sanguine Killing Formation had completely attracted the attention of many surrounding cultivators. Then, figures flew over from nearby. However, most of the cultivators did not get too close to the Great Sanguine Killing Formation. Instead, they watched from afar. Although the Divine Blood Temple did not have a good reputation in the Taiqing Immortal Realm, it was still a powerful temple force that was ranked in the top 20. It was not something that ordinary cultivators could afford to offend. The Divine Blood Temple hasn't set up the Great Sanguine Killing Formation for a long time, right? I remember that the last time they set up the Great Sanguine Killing Formation was to kill a true god 2 disasters. To be able to make the Divine Blood Temple set up the Great Sanguine Killing Formation, it's obvious that the person they want to kill this time is at least a true god. I wonder who's so unlucky. Figures constantly flickered within the blood-red flames. They all wore blood-red robes and large hoods that completely covered their faces. It was impossible to see their true appearances. Inside the black and white fish, Zhuowen stared at the figures that kept flickering in the bloody flames. His eyes narrowed slightly. He discovered that there were a total of 98 people in bloody robes flickering in the bloody flames. 90 of them were late-stage heavenly gods and 8 were peak heavenly gods. Junior Zhua, the Great Sanguine Killing Formation has 99 pillars of blood. Each pillar of blood represents an assassin. Now that 98 assassins have appeared, there's still one who's probably the key person maintaining the Great Sanguine Killing Formation. This person is also the strongest among the 99 assassins. Lian Meng's beautiful eyes were filled with worry. She also saw the 98 figures flickering in the bloody flames. However, she did not see the 99th figure. Clearly, the 99th assassin who was maintaining the Great Sanguine Killing Formation was hiding somewhere in the dark. Zhuowen's expression was extremely ugly. 90 late-stage heavenly gods and 8 peak heavenly god. In addition, there was an even stronger 99th assassin that he had yet to see. He knew that the last assassin was very likely a true god. Such a lineup had far exceeded Zhuowen's imagination. Even if he and Lian Meng worked together, they had no chance of victory at all. "Senior sister, can you contact Master?" This great sanguine killing formation is not something we can deal with, Zhuowen asked sternly. Lian Meng sighed gently. You also know that Master's way is to let nature take its course. Normally, when I look for him, I have to run back to the Virtue Hall to find him. Otherwise, I can't even see him. There's no way to contact him at all. Zhuowen's expression became ugly when he heard that. The Grand Pure One was too casual. He did not even give his disciple a way to contact him. If his disciple was assassinated, the Grand Pure One would not know. Do you know who we are? We're disciples of the Grand Pure One of the Virtue Hall. Your Blood Divine Hall had best weigh the pros and cons. Do you want to offend our Virtue Hall? With no other choice, Zhuowen could only bring up the Virtue Hall and the Grand Pure One in hopes of deterring these assassins. It doesn't matter who you are. As long as you've been given the Great Sanguine Killing Order, you'll be hunted down by our Blood Divine Hall even if you're the King of the Heavens. A deep voice came from the top of the blood flames. It sounded like countless bolts of thunder in Zhuowen and Lian Meng's ears. Then, a man in blood-red armor and a ferocious mask slowly walked over on blood-red flames. When he arrived, the 98 people in blood-red robes all stopped. They knelt on one knee, as if this person was their king and they were waiting for him to arrive. The man's aura was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen estimated that he was slightly stronger than Jing Hai from before. This made Zhuowen's expression become uglier and uglier. Kill them! The man glanced at Zhuowen and Lian Meng indifferently before waving his right hand. Whoosh! 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 Immediately, 90 late Heavenly God blood-red robes rushed towards Zhuowen and Lian Meng under the lead of 8-peak Heavenly God blood-red robe. They all took out blood-red daggers that flickered with blood-red light. Senior sister, help me defend. Leave the killing to me. Zhuowen glanced at Lian Meng beside him. With a stomp of his right foot, invisible ripples surged out from his body. Ripples spread out from under his feet, as if everything under his feet had become the surface of an ancient well without ripples. Lian Meng was just about to say something, but Zhuowen had left too quickly. She stomped her foot in anger, but she had no choice but to listen to Zhuowen's orders. She pointed her jade-like hands, summoning the yang fish of the yin-yang Pisces. It revolved around Zhuowen, ready to deal with the attacks of the blood-red robes at any time. The first person to arrive before Zhuowen was a peak Heavenly God blood-red robed man. When he saw that it was only an early Heavenly God ant, contempt appeared in his eyes. He casually swiped his dagger and stabbed it into Zhuowen's neck. Unfortunately, this blood-robed figure had only stabbed into Zhuowen's afterimage. At the instant he'd just recovered from his shock, the sword in Zhuowen's right hand had slashed out, and a wisp of sword light that was condensed to the extreme flashed out. Moreover, this wisp of sword light had even undergone the amplification of 3 Dao insight. Bang! The blood-red robed man reacted extremely quickly. He stabbed out with the dagger in his right hand and struck the sword light. Unfortunately, the moment the dagger struck the sword light, an extremely terrifying milky white light erupted from the sword light and instantly enveloped the blood-red robed man. All of this happened in an instant. The first peak Heavenly God blood-red robed man had been heavily injured by Zhuowen due to his carelessness. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, the other 7 peak Heavenly God blood-red robed men had already split into 7 different directions. They each performed their own moves and struck Zhuowen. Fortunately, Zhuowen had the protection of the yang fish outside his body. He grunted and immediately retreated with the help of the recoil. The direction Zhuowen retreated in was the direction of the 90 late Heavenly God blood-red robed men behind the 7 peak Heavenly Gods. Just as the 7 peak Heavenly God blood-red robed men were about to chase after him, Zhuowen slashed out with the divine sword in his right hand. He performed the first move of the Tao of Destruction sword technique, piercing thistles. The moment he slashed out, strands of purple ripples surged out from Zhuowen's body. The purple ripples condensed into Zhuowen's sword, causing the sword's power to reach its strongest moment in history. The power of 4 Dao intense? Above the crimson flames, the man in crimson armor saw the purple intent in the sword with a single glance. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. The piercing thistles was extremely powerful after being strengthened by 4 Dao intent. Countless thistles with sharp sword intent spun in a spiral and blocked the path of the 7-peak heavenly god blood-red-robed men. Sword Radiance first appearance. After the 7-peak heavenly god blood-red-robed men, Zhuowen suddenly slashed out at the 90 late heavenly god blood-red-robed men behind him. At this moment, he slashed out several sword radiances in succession. The moment the sword radiances were slashed out, a terrifying white light erupted and enveloped the 20 or so late heavenly god blood-red-robed men at the front. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The moment Zhuowen slashed out with the sword radiance, the remaining 60 or so late heavenly god blood-red-robed men who were still alive surrounded Zhuowen and attacked him with their own techniques. Instantly, Zhuowen's body emitted continuous muffled crackling sounds. Even though Zhuowen had the protection of the young fish, he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.